Tonight we're heading deep into the forgotten corners of Texas, places that used to breathe with life, and now only echo with it. Old streets, boarded up storefronts, rusted signs, and empty windows that locals swear aren't always empty. Because these aren't just abandoned towns. These are 4 of the creepiest Texas ghost towns, where nighttime activity keeps getting caught by locals. Strange lights moving where no power exists, footsteps on streets with no residents, and shadows showing up in videos when nobody was there to cast them. But before we step past the last working streetlight, there's something weird. Most people make one mistake. They watch a minute, then leave without subscribing. And by doing that, they miss the stories that get darker, meaner, and way more personal as the night goes on. So, don't be that person. Hit subscribe right now, because once we enter these ghost towns, it doesn't always feel like we're the only ones watching. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Because in Texas, when the sun goes down on a ghost town, that's when the locals say the real residents finally come out. All right, lock your doors, keep your volume up. Now, let's dive into the darkness, into 4 creepiest ghost towns in Texas with nighttime activity caught by locals. The lights that move. My name's Colby Rains. I'm from Shafter, Texas, and I work as a water hauler for oil field crews. Listen, I am sitting behind my trailer right now because I can still hear my refrigerator clicking inside and I cannot handle any extra noise. I got my cracked phone in my hand and my knees are up and I keep looking over my shoulder like a kid. And I know that sounds stupid, but dude, I swear to God, if I stay inside, I start counting the little red lights on my smoke detector and the microwave and the router, and then my head goes right back to that road and those houses and that thing that moved like it was learning me. That day started so normal it makes me sick. I woke up in the dark because my alarm never has the screen brightness right, and it always looks like a tiny moon on my nightstand. It was 4:37 a.m. I remember because I slapped it and it did that thing where it shows the time bigger like it is yelling at you. My mouth tasted like stale coffee even though I had not had coffee yet. I pulled on the same faded work shirt I always wear, the gray one with the snapped buttons, and there was this rust-colored stain on the pocket that I have scrubbed and scrubbed, and it will not come out. I thought it was red dirt or maybe spilled hot sauce from some old breakfast, but now every time I see it, I feel like it is proof I cannot wash away. I went outside and the air was cold in that West Texas way where it cuts your nose, but the sky is clean. I stood there by the steps and I could hear nothing but a distant truck on the highway, one of those low moans that comes and goes. I ate a breakfast burrito from the gas station in town, egg and potato and too much salt, and it was wrapped so tight in foil it burned my fingers. I remember licking the salt off my thumb and thinking I needed to drink more water, which is funny because my whole job is water. I went down to the yard, checked my truck, checked the straps, checked the valves, the hoses, the couplings, all the things you check 100 times because if you mess up, you make a mess that follows you for weeks. My dispatcher that week was a woman named Margot, and she talks like she is always in a hurry even when she is calm. She called me at 5:52 and said, "Colby, you got a late run today. They need a top-off out by the old lease road past that abandoned settlement." And I said, "Which one?" And she said, "The one everybody takes pictures of." And then she paused like she was smiling and said, "You will know it when you see it." That was the first little wrong thing, man, because I did know what she meant, and I did not like that she said it like a joke. Around here people talk about lights all the time like it is weather. They say, "Oh, the lights were out last night," or "The lights were real bright this week," like it is a thing you can set your watch by. I never cared. I always figured it was headlights on a distant road or somebody messing around or some kind of reflection off the mountain. I am not a guy who chases that stuff. I am a guy who tries to get home, eat, shower, sleep, do it again. That was my plan. I did a couple runs in the morning, just normal, nothing special, a couple of tanks, a couple of pump sites, dusty roads, dogs that bark from behind fence wire, Sun climbing and that white glare that makes everything look flat. By noon, the heat started doing that shimmer off the hood. I went home, took my boots off at the door because my wife gets mad about the dirt, and I sat in a chair and ate a sandwich and watched a game show with the volume down. My kid was at my sister's place, so the trailer was quiet, except for that refrigerator. I dozed off with my hand on my stomach, and when I woke up, the clock on the wall said 2:18, and the light coming through the blinds made stripes on the floor. I remember staring at those stripes and thinking they were too straight, too sharp, like someone had cut them out with a blade. I shook it off. I took a shower. I pulled on that same gray work shirt again because it was still fine. That stain stared at me like a little eye. I said out loud, "I need to buy new shirts," and I laughed to myself, just a small laugh, because I never do. By 5:41 p.m., I was back at the yard, and I punched in at 5:58 on the little machine that always sticks. And I remember the exact time because the machine made me do it twice, and I got annoyed. And I looked at my phone. The run was scheduled for after dark because the site wanted the water at a specific time. And also because out there you can drive those lease roads easier without the sun blinding you. Margot told me on the radio, "Take Route 67 out, then cut south on the county road. Then you will hit that old settlement. Do not take the road through it. Take the road around it." And I said, "Why not through it?" And she said, "Because it is rough and you do not want to blow a tire." And then she added, "And because folks do not like it." I said, "Folks who?" And she said, "Just do what I said." All right. I had one other guy with me that night, not in my truck, but running a smaller support pickup because they had some equipment issues at the site and they wanted someone to bring parts. His name was Landon Pike. He is younger than me, mid-20s, always chewing on toothpicks even when he is not eating. He talks fast, like he is trying to fill silence before it fills him. We met at the turnoff, his headlights flashing twice like a signal, and I rolled down my window and he yelled, "You ready to go stare at them lights?" And I said, "I am ready to go work." And he laughed and said, "Same thing tonight, man." That was around 7:12 p.m. because the sky had that deep orange edge and the sun was already dropping behind the hills. The drive out there is long in a way that makes your back hurt, not because of distance exactly, but because there is nothing to look at except the road and the scrub and the occasional cattle guard. You get in your head. You start replaying old conversations. You start thinking about bills. You start thinking about things you said wrong 3 years ago. The radio is mostly static out there, and you either listen to the engine or you listen to your own breathing. I kept the window cracked because the cab had that smell of old rubber and dust and the faint chemical odor from the tank. Not strong, just there. Every so often Landon would come over the radio and say something like, "You see that hawk?" or "Dude, look at the sky." And I would grunt and say, "Keep your eyes on the road." I am not mean. I just do not like chatter when I am hauling. The first time I saw the settlement, it was just shapes. Dark rectangles against darker ground. Then my headlights caught the edge of a broken fence and a sign that had no letters left. Just a sheet of metal with holes in it like it had been shot 1,000 times by bored people. That is when my stomach tightened a little. Not fear, just that feeling you get when you pass a place that has been abandoned too long. The road splits there. One road goes straight through the cluster of old buildings. The other curves around wide, keeping distance like it is being polite. I took the curved road like Margot said. Landon followed. When we were about level with the first row of structures, my headlights swept across windows that were not just empty holes. There was glass in some of them. Not intact, but enough to catch light. And here is where the first wrong detail hit me. The first one I could not explain, and I did not even say it right away. In one of those windows, the reflection did not match my headlights. It was like the light was delayed, like it came a half-second late, like it was thinking about it before it decided to shine back. I told myself it was angled glass, old dirty glass, whatever. I kept driving. Landon came on the radio and said, "Hey, stop for a second." I said, "Why?" He said, "Just stop, man. You gotta see this." I said, "We got a schedule." He said, 2 seconds. I hate when someone begs, so I slowed and pulled onto the shoulder where the ground was packed. I left my truck in gear, foot on brake. I saw Landon's pickup stop behind me, his high beams washing my mirrors. I grabbed my flashlight out of habit, even though I did not need it, and I leaned out the window. Landon was already out of his truck, standing by his hood, phone held up like he was filming. He yelled, "Look!" I looked where he pointed, past the buildings, toward a low dip in the land where the horizon goes soft. There were lights out there. Not one, a few. Small, pale, kind of yellow-white, floating at different heights. They moved slow. At first it looked like headlights on a distant road, but they were too separated, and they did not keep to a line. They drifted, stopped, drifted again, like they were looking for something. Landon said, "See, I told you, they're out tonight." I said, "Probably cars." He said, "Cars do not do that." I watched them for maybe 10 seconds. One of them dipped down and then rose again, like it bounced. Another slid sideways, like it went around something. My skin got goose flesh on my arms, and I could not tell if it was the cold coming back or something else. I said, "It is probably folks out there messing around." Landon said, "Nobody goes out there at night, man." I said, "People do dumb things." Landon said, "I am filming it." I said, "Fine, but get back in the truck." He said, "Wait, watch this." He held the phone steady and said, "I am going to blink." Then he blinked hard, like he was making a point. He said, "Tell me if I am crazy." I said, "You are crazy." He did not laugh. He blinked again and said, "No, look." I looked again. One of the lights, the one lowest to the ground, was closer. Not by much, but closer, like it had moved from behind one building to the gap between two. I felt that weird pinch behind my eyes, like when you stare at the sun too long. I said, "It moved." Landon said, "Every time, man." I said, "Stop doing that." Landon said, "I am not doing anything." I said, "Get in your truck." He said, "One more." I swear, Colby, I swear, just one more. I want you to see it. I should have just driven. That is what I keep thinking. I should have just driven. But I was standing there in my cab, half out the window, and my curiosity grabbed me like a hand. I said, "Fine, blink." Landon blinked. I blinked too, without meaning to, because he said it, and it made my eyes do it. When I opened my eyes, that same light was closer again, not in a smooth way, in a clean way, like it had jumped from one mark to the next. It was now in the open space between the buildings, not behind them. It was maybe a mile away, maybe less. Hard to tell in the dark. It was low, about the height of a person, but it was not attached to a person. It was just light. Landon's voice went smaller. He said, "See?" I swallowed, and my throat made a clicking sound. I said, "It is probably on a road." Landon said, "There is no road there." I said, "You do not know that." Landon said, "I do know that. I have driven all these roads." I said, "People make tracks." Landon said, "It is not a truck, man. It is not." He sounded like he was about to cry, but he was smiling too, like he was excited. That mix is what scares me now. That mix of fear and excitement, like he wanted it to be real more than he wanted to be safe. I said, "That is enough. Get in. We got work." He hesitated, then climbed back into his pickup. I rolled my window up and started moving again, slow at first. In my mirror, I could see Landon's headlights, and beyond them, those distant lights, tiny in the dark, like someone held a match far away. As we drove around the settlement, I kept glancing in the side mirror without meaning to. The light stayed out there, drifting, but that one low light seemed to hold steady in the gap like it had found where it wanted to be. We hit the lease road to the site. It is a rough track, but my truck can handle it. The site itself was just equipment and a couple of metal structures, nothing fancy. The air smelled like oil and hot metal. The generator hum made the night feel alive. There were two guys there waiting, faces lit from below by their headlamps. They were tired, you could hear it in their voices. One of them, a short guy with a mustache, said, "About time." I said, "You want the water and tank too?" He nodded. We hooked up, opened valves, did the whole routine. Normal. Landon helped with a hose coupling that was stuck. We worked under that harsh white light, insects flicking around it. For a while, my mind settled. Work does that. It gives you rules. It gives you steps. It makes your thoughts line up. The settlement and the lights felt like a weird thing we saw on the way, like a story you tell later and laugh about. Then Landon said, "Hey, Colby, your phone." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Your phone is ringing." I checked my pocket. My phone was not ringing. It was dead quiet. Landon said, "No, I mean your truck phone, the one in the cab. It is ringing." I frowned. The truck has a basic unit for dispatch, and it does not ring like a normal phone. It chirps. I heard it then, faint through the cab glass. A ringtone, a plain one, the kind you set when you do not care. That made my skin go tight because I had not set any ringtone. I climbed into my cab, and sure enough, the screen on the dash unit was lit up. Incoming call. It showed a number. It was my own number. I stared at it. My mouth went dry. Landon climbed up on the step and leaned in like he wanted to be close. He said, "Answer it." I said, "It is my number." Landon said, "Answer it anyway." I said, "It is probably a glitch." Landon said, "Answer it." The mustache guy from the site yelled, "You got problems?" And I yelled back, "Just a second." I stared at that screen. It kept ringing, steady, patient. I pressed answer because my hand moved before my brain caught up. I put it on speaker. There was no voice at first, just a faint hiss, like wind through a crack. Then I heard breathing, slow. Not like someone on a bad line, like someone holding the phone very close to their mouth. Then a voice, low and close, said, "Do not blink." I froze so hard my neck hurt. Landon's eyes went wide. I said, "Who is this?" The voice did not answer. It just breathed again and said, "Do not blink." Then the line went dead. I stared at the unit like it had bitten me. Landon whispered, "Dude." I did not say anything. I could not. My tongue felt thick. I ended the call and the screen went dark. I looked at Landon. He looked like he was trying to smile, but he could not make it happen. He said, "That is not funny," I said. "I did not do it." He said, "I know." I said, "It is probably dispatch messing around." Landon said, "Your own number." I said, "It is probably a spoof." Landon said, "Do you know how to do that?" I said, "No." Landon said, "Margot." I said, "Margot would not do that." Landon said, "People do dumb things." He said it like he was throwing my own words back at me. I got out of the cab. My legs felt a little shaky, like after you step off a ladder and your body still thinks you are high up. I walked back to the hose, checked the flow, pretended I was normal, but my eyes kept going to the edge of the light, to the darkness beyond. The night out there is thick. It feels like it presses. The generator hum was suddenly too steady, like a heartbeat you cannot escape. The mustache guy said, "You all right?" I said, "Fine." He said, "You look pale." I said, "Just tired." He said, "You hauling again after this?" I said, "Just this run." He nodded like he did not believe me. We finished the transfer. We signed the paper. We disconnected. Normal motions. Landon did not talk much. He kept touching his eyelids like he was checking if they were real. When we got back in our vehicles, I told him on the radio, "We are going straight back, no stops." He said, "Yeah." His voice was thin. We started down the lease road toward the settlement again. The sight lights faded behind us, and the darkness came back around the trucks like water. At first, I just wanted to get past the settlement and back to highway, back to normal lines and mile markers and maybe a late dinner. But as we approached the settlement, I saw the lights again, and they were closer than before. Not closer by a little, closer by a lot. They were not out on the horizon anymore. They were among the buildings now, not in the sky, between structures, slipping through gaps. There were 3 of them visible, one low, one higher, one that moved like it was on a slope. And that low one, the one that had jumped earlier, it was near the edge of the road, near the broken fence line. It was about the size of a basketball maybe, but bright enough to make a pale patch on the ground. My hands clenched on the wheel. Landon came on the radio, voice loud with panic. "Colby, they are right there." I said, "Do not stop." He said, "They are right there." I said, "Do not stop." I kept driving. The road curved around the settlement, and the buildings slid by on my left, dark hulks with holes for windows. The low light moved, not fast, but with purpose, staying even with my truck, pacing me like it knew the road. I felt like my eyes were drying out because I was forcing them open. I kept thinking about that voice saying, "Do not blink." The worst part is, your eyes want to blink. They do it without asking. It is like breathing. I tried to stare straight ahead, but the light in my peripheral pulled me. I kept swallowing, trying to keep my throat from closing. Landon's pickup was behind me, and I could see his headlights in my mirror, jittery as he bounced on the rough road. He said, "I am not blinking, man. I am not blinking." I said, "Focus on driving." He said, I cannot. I keep seeing it." I said, "Just keep your distance." Then the dash unit chirped, not the phone ring, but the dispatch unit, like it was trying to connect. I glanced down for half a second, and in that half second my eyes blinked. It was not a choice. It was a reflex. I blinked, and when my eyes opened, the low light was no longer pacing me on the left. It was in front of me, in the road. Not far, close enough that my headlights hit it and did not change it, like it was its own brightness. I slammed the brake. The truck shuddered. Water sloshed in the tank behind me with that deep, heavy sound that makes you think you are going to jackknife. My seatbelt locked and cut my shoulder. I stopped. The light was there, hovering at hood height, dead center. It did not flicker. It did not move. It was just there, like it had been waiting for me to blink so it could step into my lane. Landon screamed over the radio, "Do not hit it." I whispered, "I am stopped." My voice sounded wrong to me, like it was coming from someone else's mouth. The light drifted closer to my windshield, slow, like it was testing my space. It came within a few feet of the glass. I could not see anything inside it. No shape, no body, no bug cloud. Just a bright, round glare that hurt my eyes. The air in the cab felt suddenly cold, like someone opened a freezer door. My breath fogged the lower edge of the windshield. The light pressed closer, and the glass did not fog under it, like the warmth was being pulled away. I heard a sound then, not from the radio, not from the engine, but from outside, from the settlement, like boots on wood. A steady thump, 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 moving along a porch that should not have been there. The light stayed right in front of me, and my dash cam, the one I use for insurance, started beeping like it had lost signal. The screen on it flickered. It showed a black image, then it showed the road. Then it showed something else. Not the road, like a different angle, like it was looking into the settlement instead of forward. I stared at it, confused, because the camera does not move. It is mounted. The image on the screen showed one of the old buildings, closer than it actually was. And in the doorway of that building, there was a figure. Not clear, just a person shape, standing still. Then the figure lifted its arm, like it was waving, but slow, too slow, like it was dragging the motion through thick air. Landon's voice was blasting, "Colby, what is happening? What is it doing?" And I could not answer. My throat would not. My eyes burned. They were watering. Tears ran down my face without me crying. Just because I was forcing my eyes open so hard, the light pulsed once, not brighter, just a shift, like a breath. Then the dash unit rang again, my own number again. I did not want to answer, but the ring was in my bones. I hit answer without thinking, like my hand was not mine. Speaker, breathing. Then my own voice, my exact voice, said, "Colby, you already blinked." I froze so hard I felt a pain shoot down my spine. My voice on the speaker sounded tired, like I had been talking for hours. It said, "Do not do it again." I whispered, "Who are you?" The voice said, "You are going to forget this part, so listen. You are going to drive when it moves away. You are going to think you are safe. You are not. Do not look in the mirror when you pass the last house." I started shaking. My teeth clicked. Landon was yelling, "Who is on the phone, Colby?" And I could not answer. The voice said, "Do not look in the mirror. If you look, you will see the wrong distance. You will see it in the wrong place. You will not be able to fix it." I swallowed, and the swallowing sounded loud in the cab. I said, "What do you want?" The voice said, "You already gave it what it wants when you stopped. It learned your timing. It learned your blink." Then the line went dead again. The ring stopped. The cab felt too small, like the walls were moving in. The light outside stayed fixed, inches from my glass. I could see my own reflection in the windshield, pale, eyes wide, tears on my cheeks. I looked like a stranger. The boot sound from the settlement stopped. Silence. Then, very softly, I heard a whisper from outside, right near my driver door, like someone was standing there with their mouth close to the seam of the window. It said, "Blink." Not a voice through glass, not muffled. Clear, like it was inside. I jerked my head toward the window, but I did not see anyone. Just darkness and the faint outline of the buildings and that hovering light in front. The whisper came again, "Blink." Landon screamed over the radio, "Colby, get out! Get out of there!" I said, "No." I did not know why I said no. I just knew if I opened my door, I would be closer to it, whatever it was, and I could not do that. My eyes were burning so bad I felt like sand was under my lids. I kept trying to keep them open. Tears poured. My nose ran. I was making these little choking sounds because I could not breathe right. The light outside shifted slightly to the left, then back to center, like it was teasing. Then it moved, fast for the first time, not a drift, a snap, to the passenger side of my hood. It was gone from in front. The road ahead was clear. My first thought was go, just go, and my foot moved toward the gas. Then I remembered that voice, my voice, saying, "Do not look in the mirror when you pass the last house." I did not want to look. But dude, when something moves beside you, you want to track it. You want to know where it went. Your brain screams for information. I forced my gaze forward, and I eased the truck forward, slow, like the light might jump back into my lane if I surged. Landon was still behind me. He kept saying, "I am behind you. I am behind you. I am not blinking, man. I am not blinking." I said, "Keep your distance." My voice sounded like I had been screaming, even though I had not. As the truck rolled past the buildings, I kept my eyes locked on the road, but the edges of the settlement slid by in my peripheral, and I could feel something there, like pressure, like the air was thicker near the old houses. The other lights were still moving among the structures, higher now, slipping between roof lines. I heard that boot sound again, but this time it was on linoleum, that hollow indoor sound, like someone walking down a hallway. It made no sense because there was no intact hallway. The sound came in patterns. 3 steps, pause, 3 steps, pause, like a person pacing. My skin crawled. I gripped the wheel so hard my fingers hurt. The last house, the farthest one on the curve, came up, a long, low shape with a porch that sagged. As I passed it, every part of my body wanted to glance in the mirror. Just a quick check, just a small look. I fought it. I kept staring forward. I said out loud, "Do not look." Landon heard me and said, "What?" I said, "Do not look in your mirror." Landon said, "Why?" I said, "Just do it." Landon said, "Colby, what is happening?" I said, "Just do it." Then my eyes blinked. I did not choose it. They just did it. It was like my body betrayed me. When they opened, I was looking forward still, but I had lost the thread of where I was for a half second, like someone cut a frame out of a film. My stomach dropped. The road ahead looked the same, but the curve was wrong. The angle was different. The settlement, which should have been on my left behind me now, felt like it was still beside me, like it had not moved away. I heard Landon on the radio, "Colby, you just blinked," and his voice sounded far away, like he was down a long tunnel. I said, "Keep driving." He said, "The road is not right, man." I said, "Keep driving." We came out of the curve and onto a straight stretch that should have led us to the county road. But the county road did not show up. The straight stretch kept going. The mile markers I knew were not there. The fence line that usually runs on the right was missing. It was open land, flat, empty, black. My headlights reached out and found nothing but dirt and scrub that looked the same every 100 yards, like it was repeating. Landon came on the radio and said, "This is not the way." I said, "It is the way." He said, "No, we should have hit the cattle guard by now." I said, "Keep driving." My heart was hammering, my hands were sweating. The cab smelled like my own fear, sour and hot. I glanced at the clock on the dash. It said 9:44 p.m. I had left the site around 9:12. That made sense. But then the clock flickered, and for a moment it said 9:44 again, like it had not moved. I stared at it. It clicked to 9:45. I watched. It clicked to 9:45 again. The same minute repeated. I blinked hard to clear my eyes, and when I looked again, it was 9:45 still. My skin went cold. Landon said, "My phone has no service." I said, "Mine too." I tried to call Margot anyway. No ring. Just nothing. The radio crackled. Then a burst of voices came through. Not ours, not dispatch. A bunch of clipped words like someone scanning channels. I heard my own name in there, faint, like it was being said in a different room. I turned the radio knob, and the voices stopped, and then the whisper came through clear. From the radio speaker, "Blink." I slapped the radio off. Silence returned, but the words stayed in my head like a ringing. We kept driving that straight stretch, and it did not end. My fuel gauge, which should not have moved, dipped a little, then jumped back, then dipped again, like it was unsure. I tried to focus on small things, the vibration of the steering wheel, the hum of the engine, the way the headlights made the dust in the air look like snow. But my brain kept reaching back to that light by my windshield, that dash cam image showing a figure in a doorway, my own voice telling me I already blinked. Landon started talking fast, like he could not stop. He said, "Colby, I am telling you, man, I have driven this road 100 times, and it is not this long, and I keep seeing something in my mirror. I know you told me not to look, but I looked just a little, and there is a light behind us, and it is not my headlights. It is like that thing is following, and I cannot keep my eyes open. They are drying out, man. They are burning, and I keep thinking if I blink again, it is going to be right on my bumper. I keep thinking it is going to be inside my cab." And I said, "Do not look." He said, "I already did." I said, "Do not do it again." He said, "It is too late." He sounded like he was about to throw up. I said, "Keep driving." He said, "The road is making a sound." I listened. At first I heard nothing but our engines. Then I heard it, a faint hum under the tires, like the road itself had a tone. Not the normal tire on asphalt hiss. A low note, steady, like a distant power line. It made my teeth hurt. I said, "Yeah," Landon said, "it is like it is singing." I did not answer. We drove and drove. The straight line did not bend. The sky overhead was black and empty. No clouds, just stars like pinholes. Then, ahead, I saw a sign. Reflective. My headlights hit it and it flashed. Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. A sign means a real road. I slowed a little and squinted. The sign said, Shafter 18. My stomach dropped. That could not be right. Shafter is where I live. If it said Shafter 18, we were on the county road near home, but we should have been much farther out. Landon came on the radio. You see that? You see that sign? I said, yeah. He said, that is not possible. I said, just keep driving. We passed the sign and the road finally bent, like a normal road. I felt my shoulders loosen by an inch. Then I saw the settlement again, ahead, on the left. The same cluster of dark buildings, the same broken fence, the same blank metal sign full of holes. My mouth went open and no sound came out. Landon screamed, no, no, no. I said, keep driving. Landon said, we just left it. I said, keep driving. We approached and the lights were there again, drifting between the houses. That low light was back in the gap like it was waiting at its mark. I felt like I was going to pass out. My eyes burned so bad I could barely see. Tears kept running. I tried to wipe them, but my hands were shaking. The dash unit rang again. My own number. I did not answer. It kept ringing. It rang and rang until it stopped on its own. Then the radio crackled and Margot's voice came through, crisp, like nothing was wrong. Colby, where are you? I almost sobbed from relief. I said, Margot, we are stuck out by the settlement. The road is looping. Something is wrong. There was a pause. Margot said, Colby, you are breaking up. I said, no, listen, we are out by the old settlement. We left the site, we came around and we are back here and there are lights and my truck unit keeps calling for my own number. Margot said, Colby, you are on the county road by Valentine. I said, no. She said, I can see your ping. I said, my ping is wrong. Margot said, you are tired. I said, I am not. Margot said, go straight to the highway. Do not stop. I said, it is not letting us go. Margot said, Colby, stop playing. My blood went cold. I said, I am not playing. Margot said, Landon is not answering me. I looked in the mirror. I know I was told not to. But when she said that, my fear grabbed the mirror like a handle and pulled. I looked. Behind me, Landon's headlights were there, but they were far, too far, like he was a mile back, and the road between us looked longer than it should, like it had stretched. His lights flickered, not like he was hitting bumps, but like they were being covered and uncovered. Then, between his headlights, I saw a small pale light, low, pacing him, the same way it had paced me. I jerked my eyes forward like the mirror burned me. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. I said into the radio, Margot, keep talking to me. Margot said, Colby, why did you stop? I said, I did not stop. Margot said, your speed is 0. I looked at my dash. My speedometer said 25. I looked out the windshield. The road was moving under me. I could feel the truck rolling, but the radio said I was stopped. Landon screamed over our channel, Colby, it is right by me. It is right by me. And then his voice cut off into static. I said, Landon. No answer. Static. Margot said, Colby, what is going on? I said, I do not know. I said, I do not know. I do not know. The settlement came up on my left again, and the low light shifted toward the road like it was preparing. I forced my eyes open wider. I told myself I would not blink. I told myself I would tear my eyelids before I blinked. The light jumped. It snapped in front of me again, closer this time, like it had learned how fast I could brake. I slammed the brake. The truck shuddered. I stopped. The light hovered inches from my windshield. The dashcam beeped and the screen flickered to that sideways view again, showing the doorway of the building, the figure inside. This time the figure was closer in the frame, like the camera had zoomed, but it cannot zoom. The figure's arm lifted again, slow wave. Then the figure pointed, not at the camera, but toward the mirror, like it knew I had looked. My skin went numb. The whisper came from the radio speaker, blink. Margot's voice cut in. "Colby, answer me." The whisper overlapped her voice like it was using the same channel. Blink. I squeezed my eyes open so hard my forehead hurt. My lashes trembled. Tears poured. The light outside did not move. It felt like it was waiting for the tiny crack of a blink, waiting to step through it. I pressed my palms against my thighs to stop them shaking. I said out loud, "I am not blinking." Then the phone rang again, my own number, and this time I answered because I needed something, anything, to change. On speaker, my own voice again, quieter now, said, "You should not have looked." I said, "Landon, is that you?" My voice said, "Landon is behind you, but he is not the same distance anymore." I said, "What do I do?" My voice said, "You cannot make it stop, but you can make it choose someone else." My mouth went dry. I said, "No." My voice said, "If you stay, it will learn you until there is nothing left but the habit. If you go, it will follow the last thing that blinked." I said, "I am not leaving him." My voice said, "You already did when you looked." Then the call ended. The light outside pulsed once. The dashcam screen flashed, and for 1 second it showed the inside of my own cab from above, like a camera in the ceiling. I saw myself sitting there, eyes wide, mouth open, tears. And behind me, in the dark space over the back seat, there was a pale shape. Not a person, more like a patch of light with edges that did not hold still. I could not feel it, but I saw it. I jerked my head, twisting to look behind me. There was nothing, just the back seat, empty. The moment I turned, the light outside moved away, sliding to the side, clearing my lane like it was inviting me to go. I snapped my head forward again. My breath was coming in short, sharp pulls. I tasted metal. I put the truck in gear. I started rolling. My mind was screaming, "Do not look in the mirror, do not look," but another part of me was screaming, "Landon." I kept going, slow at first. As I passed the last house, I did not look. I did not. I stared at the road like it was a rope I could hold on to. The singing hum under the tires grew louder, like the road was pleased. Then, in my rearview mirror, without me turning my head, I saw Landon's headlights flare bright, and I heard his horn blare once, long, and then cut off. I flinched so hard my hands jerked the wheel. I did not look. I did not. I kept driving. My eyes blinked. Again, it was not a choice. They blinked because they had to. When they opened, the road ahead was different. I was on the highway. Real highway. White lines, reflectors, a billboard in the distance. The settlement was gone. The hum was gone. My dash clock read 1:16 a.m. That made no sense. I slammed my brakes anyway and pulled onto the shoulder, heart pounding. I put the truck in park. I sat there shaking. I tried to call Landon. No answer. I called Margot. It rang normal. She answered, annoyed. "Colby, where have you been?" I said, "Where is Landon?" She said, "Who?" I said, "Landon Pike, he was with me." She paused. She said, "Colby, you are alone tonight." I said, "No." She said, "Colby, the support pickup never left the yard. The part run got canceled." I said, "That is not true." She said, "Are you drinking?" I said, "No." She said, "Get back to town, now." I said, "Landon was behind me." She said, "Colby, come in. We will talk." I hung up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the wheel. I looked at the passenger seat. There was Landon's toothpick there, snapped in half, lying on the fabric like it had been dropped minutes ago. I stared at it until my eyes watered again. I drove back to town in a fog. The road signs looked too bright. Every headlight coming toward me felt like a threat. I kept my eyes forward. I did not look at my mirrors more than I had to. When I got to the yard, it was quiet. Most trucks parked, lights off. Margot was in the office with 2 other guys, and they all looked at me like I was a problem. Margot said, "Where is the water ticket?" I handed it to her. My hand was trembling. She glanced at it and frowned. She said, "This is dated yesterday." I said, "No, it is not." She turned it toward me. The date on the ticket was the day before. The timestamp was 8:03 p.m. My stomach flipped. I said, "That is wrong." Margot said, "Colby, you did not haul tonight." I said, "I did." Margot said, "Your truck never checked out." I said, "That is impossible." One of the guys said, "Maybe he fell asleep in his cab." Margot said, "Colby, your truck GPS shows you leaving the yard, going 10 miles, sitting for 2 hours, then coming back." I said, "No." I said, "We went to the site." I said, "We went past the settlement." I said, "There were lights." My own number called, my own voice. Margot's face went flat. She said, "Go home." I said, "Where is Landon?" Margot said, "There is no Landon on shift." I said, "He was with me." Margot said, "Colby, go home." I left because I could not stand under those fluorescent lights, the way they buzz and make everything look sick. I drove home and my trailer looked normal, porch light on, a moth hitting it, my wife's car in the dirt. I walked inside and my wife said, "You look awful." I said, "Where is our kid?" She said, "He is asleep." I said, "What day is it?" She laughed like I was joking. She said, "Thursday." I said, "No, what date?" She said, "Colby, are you okay?" I checked my phone. The date on my phone was 2 days later than I thought. 2 days missing. I went into the bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed and I tried to think through it. Tried to grab the timeline like it was a rope, but it slid through my hands. I remembered breakfast. I remembered the stain on my shirt. I remembered the settlement. I remembered the light inches from my windshield. Then the next memory was the highway shoulder at 1:16 a.m. Everything between felt like a wet smear. I told my wife I was tired. I lied. I could not explain it. I did not want her to look at me like I was broken. That night, I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and every little light in the room became a problem. The tiny green dot on the charger, the red blink on the smoke detector, the faint glow from the clock. I kept thinking, if I blink, it will move. I kept thinking it was learning my timing. I forced my eyes open until they hurt. I would blink anyway because you cannot stop it forever. When I blinked, the little lights would seem closer for a second, like my brain was playing a trick. I would sit up sweating. I would check the room. Nothing. The next day at the yard, Margot acted like I had been on vacation. She said, "You ready to haul again?" I said, "I missed 2 days." She said, "You called in sick." I said, "I did not." She said, "Colby, you did." She pulled up a voicemail on her computer. It was my voice, calm, saying, "Hey Margot, I am not going to make it in for a couple days. Got a fever, sorry." My voice. I never said it. My stomach turned. I asked to hear it again. She played it again. Same. I left the office. I went to my truck. I opened the cab. On the dash, taped there like someone had placed it carefully, was a small folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a crude drawing of a circle with a line through it like an eye crossed out. Under it, in block letters, it said, "Do not blink." My hands went numb. I looked around the yard. Guys were walking, talking, smoking, laughing, like the world was normal. No one else reacted. I crumpled the paper and shoved it in my pocket like I was hiding a crime. I drove home. I sat behind my trailer. That is where I am now. Because I cannot go in. Because every time I go in, I start counting lights. And listen, I tried to be normal after that. I tried. I went back to work for a week. I stayed on main roads. I refused any run that went near that settlement. I told Margot, "I will not go out there." She said, "Why?" I said, "I just will not." She said, "You are being difficult." I said, "I do not care." I started getting headaches, deep ones, like pressure behind my eyes. I would be driving, and suddenly I would realize I had blinked and I could not remember the last mile. Just blank. I would look at the clock and see the minutes repeat sometimes, not always. just enough to make me feel like I was losing it. My dash cam started capturing weird clips. I would check it for safety like I always do, and there would be a file with a timestamp that did not match, a short clip of darkness, then a single frame of that settlement doorway with the figure. Just one frame. Then back to normal road. I deleted them. They would show up again, like the storage was not clearing. I took the dash cam out and threw it away. I bought a new one. Same thing started after a few days. Landon, I kept asking about him. I asked around town. Nobody knew a Landon Pike. I checked social media. Nothing. It is like he never existed, except I have his toothpick snapped in half in a little plastic bag now because I cannot throw it away. Except sometimes, late at night, my phone will show a missed call from my own number, and when I check the voicemail, there is only breathing, slow, and then my voice whispering, "You already blinked." I have not told my wife all of this. I told her I saw something on a road, and it scared me. She thinks it was a near wreck. She thinks I am being dramatic. I do not blame her. I sound crazy, even to myself, but I know what I saw. I know the way that light moved in clean jumps, like it was stepping through the gaps in my attention. I know the way the road looped back on itself, like the land was folding. I know I lost 2 days, and my own voice called in sick for me. I know there was a note on my dash that I did not put there. I know I heard boots on linoleum in a place that had no floor. And dude, the worst part is, it is not done, because I cannot stop blinking. Nobody can. And every time I blink now, I feel like something is counting with me, like it is measuring the space between my eyelids, like it is practicing. I do not go out past Valentine anymore. I do not take that county road even in daylight. I will drive an extra hour to avoid it. If I see a distant light on a ridge, even a ranch light, even a cell tower, my stomach drops. I keep my mirrors angled down so I see less behind me. That is not safe, I know, but I cannot stand seeing the distance stretch wrong. I flinch when my kid turns on a nightlight. I get angry when my wife leaves the porch light on. I unscrew bulbs. I cover LEDs with tape. I tell myself I am just being careful, but really I am trying to starve something that feeds on light and on attention. Sometimes when I am alone, I test it like an idiot. I will stare at the tiny red dot on the smoke detector, and I will blink, and I will see if it looks closer. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not. The days it does, I cannot eat. I sit here behind my trailer at 3 a.m. and I talk into my phone like it is a confession because I do not know what else to do with it. And listen, wait, I forgot to tell you the part that keeps looping in my head, the part that makes me think it knows I am talking. Last week, I was in the grocery store, just buying milk, normal thing, bright fluorescent lights, people around. I walked past the aisle with the cheap flashlights and the camping lanterns. One of the lantern boxes was on the shelf crooked, like it had been shoved back wrong. The box had a picture of a round lantern glowing white. Under the picture, the brand name was in big letters, but the letters had been scratched with something sharp, like someone had tried to erase it. Under the scratched letters, someone had written in pen, "Do not blink." I froze in the aisle. A woman pushed a cart past me and said, "Excuse me," and I stepped aside like a robot. I looked around for a joke, for a teenager laughing, for anything. Nothing. Just normal shoppers. I grabbed the box and turned it over. On the back, in the little description space, someone had written, in block letters like the note on my dash, "It moves when you forget." My hands shook so bad I dropped the box. It hit the floor and popped open a little. Inside was the lantern, wrapped in plastic. And through the plastic, I saw the small indicator light on it. A tiny, pale dot, already on, even though it had no batteries in it. I ran out of the store without buying anything. I sat in my truck with my hands on the wheel and I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. And I realized my eyes were blinking without me noticing, normal human blinking. And every time I blinked, the little green light on the car across the lot, the one on the alarm system, seemed to shift, like it was trying to get my attention. So, yeah, I am not sleeping. I am sitting here behind my trailer, and my hands are cramped from holding this phone, and my eyes hurt. And I keep looking at the dark edge of the yard where the fence line disappears. Because sometimes, just sometimes, I see a pale little light out there near the brush, low to the ground, like someone crouched with a flashlight. And when I stare hard, it is gone. And when I blink, it is closer. And I know how that sounds. I know. But I am telling you the truth. The clean truth. And I have not said a single dirty word because I do not need them. Because fear does not need them. And I do not know what happens next, except that I cannot unlearn what it learned from me. And I cannot get those missing days back. And I cannot find Landon Pike because maybe he never existed, or maybe he exists somewhere in that looped road behind that last house, stuck at the wrong distance, blinking until the light steps into him. And the worst part is, I keep hearing my own voice in my head. The tired voice from that call saying, "You are going to forget this part, so listen." And I did forget parts, man. I did. And what if the part I forgot is the part where I agreed to something? What if the part I forgot is the part where it asked, and I said yes because I was scared, and my eyes burned, and my mouth was dry? And now it is just following the agreement, patient, moving only when I blink, like it has all the time in the world, and my eyes do not. The House with No Doors. My name's Colton Rains. I'm from the Indianola ruins, and I work as a road crew sign installer. Listen, I know how that sounds. I know. You hear Indianola, and you think tourist spot. You think kids taking pictures by old bricks and saltgrass and the bay smell. You think it's just broken foundations and wind. That's what I thought too. I'm not trying to make you believe me, I'm just trying to get it out of my throat. Because I cannot sleep. And I keep hearing that sound in the walls even when I'm not there. I'm behind my trailer right now, and my phone screen is cracked right across the middle, so if this cuts out, that's why. And if somebody comes around the corner, I am done talking. Okay, I am done. I cannot have my neighbors hearing this because they already look at me like I'm sick. I woke up that day, and the first thing I remember is the taste of burnt coffee because the pot was old, and I never changed the filter like I'm supposed to. I ate 2 eggs because that's what was left, and I tore a piece of tortilla off the stack, and it was a little stale around the edge. I had this gray work shirt on, the one with the stitched patch over the pocket, and it already had a brown stain down low from the week before, from mud and something else. I don't even know. It never comes out. It looks like rust, but it isn't. I remember staring at it while I chewed because it bothered me how permanent it looked, like the shirt had decided it was going to be that way forever. I punched in at 6:12. I know that because the time clock in the yard is always 5 minutes fast, and my buddy Miles makes fun of me for still checking it like it's a real clock. Miles is on the crew sometimes, not always. And that day, he was there, leaning on the bed of the truck with his lunch cooler like he was too tired to lift it. He goes, "You ready to go babysit ghosts?" And I laughed because that was the kind of joke you say when you're doing dull work near an old place where people get weird. That's all it was supposed to be. A county order came down after some locals got hurt climbing around those ruins at night. The plan was simple. Put up warning signs, some barrier posts, check the old access road. Make sure nobody had cut the chain. You do that, you drive out, you drive back, you eat lunch, you go home. I had a biscuit wrapped in foil in my cooler, and I remember thinking about it while I loaded the posts because I was hungry already. And it wasn't even 7. We drove out with the windows cracked because it was humid. That kind of thick air that makes your steering wheel feel slick. The sky was bright but flat, like it couldn't decide if it was morning or just a washed-out day. Miles was scrolling on his phone at red lights and showing me videos. One of them was from a local page. I won't name it, but it was people laughing and filming the collapsed house out there, the one everybody calls a house even though it's more like a shell. Just walls and a roofline that shouldn't still be there. No door frames, no doors. Nothing but empty rectangles where doors used to be, like the place is missing its mouth. In the video, you could see a shadow going in through one of those empty openings like it had a body and feet and weight, like it had a direction it wanted. The person filming laughs and says, "Look at that, look at that." And you can hear somebody else go, "There is no door. How is it going in?" Miles looked at me like he expected me to be spooked. I said, "It's probably just a person messing around. It's probably just perspective." And I swear to God, that was my real thought. I'm not the kind of guy who sees things in every corner. I install signs. I dig holes. I check chains. I don't go hunting trouble. We got out there around 7:30, and the road was rougher than I remembered. Like the ruts had deepened. There was salt grass on both sides, low brush, and beyond that you could see open flat land and a line of darker trees. You could smell that coastal rot smell, sea and mud, like wet boards. The ruins are spread out, not like one building, more like pieces. Old foundations, bricks half sunk, and then that collapsed house shape in the middle distance. The one people film because it still looks like something that should have rooms. It was quiet out there in a way that isn't normal quiet. Usually you get birds, you get distant trucks, you get wind. That morning there was wind, but it didn't carry sound right. It was like the air was heavy and sound had to push through it. Miles hopped out and stretched, and he goes, "Man, it feels like a waiting room." That's what he said. Waiting room. I remember it because it hit me wrong. I told him to quit talking like that and start grabbing posts. We started with the chain at the access point. The chain was there. The lock was there. But the lock was warm. I know that sounds like nothing, but it was warm like it had been in someone's hand. The sun wasn't hitting it. It was shaded. Miles touched it too and pulled his hand back like it surprised him. He goes, "Probably from the truck exhaust." I said, "The truck wasn't parked here long enough." Then I tried to laugh it off, like, "Okay, so what? A warm lock? Big deal." We drove in anyway because we had the key. The plan was to plant the warning signs around the main footpaths people use, and then put a few posts near the collapsed house because that's where people keep going at night. There were footprints, fresh ones, in the damp sand by the grass. Not boot prints like ours, more like sneakers. 2 sets, maybe 3. And that's normal too because people sneak out there. But the weird part was the way they stopped. The prints went forward and then they just ended like the person had stepped off into nowhere. Miles pointed and said, "Dude, look at that." And I said, "Maybe they stepped onto the grass." He said, "There's no grass crushed, there's no sign." And he was right. The grass was stiff, upright, no bend, no broken stems. It was like the person had walked up and then vanished. I felt that little cold pinch behind my ribs. You know that feeling when you notice something you can't explain and you decide you are not going to think about it because thinking about it makes it bigger. We worked anyway. We measured, we dug, we set posts. The soil out there is nasty, wet under a crust, and it smells like old water. Every time I lifted my shovel, it made that sucking sound. Miles kept talking to fill the space, joking about the videos, and I kept telling him to focus. Around 9:10, I walked over toward the collapsed house with a sign strapped to my shoulder. The house looked worse up close, like the walls were bowed, and the inside was just debris and sand and boards. There were no doors, no hinges, no frames, just openings. The weird thing is, from far away, the openings look like normal doorways. Up close, they don't. Up close, they're too tall, too narrow, like they were cut out after the fact. Like somebody carved them to be wrong on purpose. I stopped a few steps away because I saw something inside that made me think of a person. Not a body, not a face, just a shape that was darker than the shadow should be. It was standing in the back corner where 2 walls met. I blinked and it wasn't standing anymore. It was just a darker patch, like dampness, like the wall was stained. I told myself it was my eyes adjusting from sun to shade. I took another step, and that's when I heard the first knock. One knock. Not a bang, not wood falling, not an animal. A knock, like knuckles on a wall. It came from inside, from the left side wall, about chest height if you're standing in there. I froze and looked at Miles, but Miles was 30 yards away, head down, working. He didn't react. I waited. Nothing. I stepped again and heard it again. 2 knocks this time. Slow, like somebody waiting for an answer. I called out, "Hey, anybody in there?" And my voice sounded too loud, like it didn't belong in that air. No response. Then I heard a scrape, like something dragged along brick. I backed up without thinking. I hate that about myself. I backed up like I already knew I shouldn't be there. Miles looked up finally and yelled, "You good?" I waved and said, "Yeah, just checking." I didn't tell him about the knocks. I don't know why. Maybe because it sounded stupid. Maybe because if I said it out loud, it would become real. We finished the first set of signs and went back to the truck for water. Miles was sweating and his face had that irritated look he gets when the sun makes him feel trapped. He said, "I don't like that house." I said, "It's a pile of boards." He said, "No, I don't like the way it is quiet around it." I laughed and told him he watches too much junk online. Then I went to grab a new post from the truck bed and I noticed the tape measure was missing. The big one, the one I always keep clipped to my belt. I patted my pockets like a fool. I knew I had it because I used it 10 minutes earlier. I asked Miles if he took it. He said, "Why would I take your tape measure?" I went back along our path, looking in the sand. No tape measure. We searched around the first sign. Nothing. Miles said, "Maybe it fell in the hole you dug." We checked the hole. Nothing. Then I got angry, like stupid angry, because losing a tape measure is such a small thing, but it messes up your work and it makes you feel like you're slipping. I said, "I swear to God I had it." Miles said, "Calm down, we'll use mine." We went back toward the collapsed house because that's where we still had to put posts. The sun had shifted, and the shadows were sharper, and the openings in that house looked darker than before. I tried not to look into them. I focused on my work, digging and setting. Miles kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to step out. Around 11:30, we took lunch sitting on the tailgate. The air felt thicker, like the day had stopped moving. I ate my biscuit and it tasted like nothing. Miles didn't eat much. He kept tapping his phone and turning it over in his hands. He said he couldn't get service. That's normal out there sometimes. But he said, "No, it's like my phone is on, but it won't connect to anything. It's just spinning." I checked mine. Same thing. No bars. Then, while we were sitting there, we heard a knock again. 3 knocks, spaced out. It came from the collapsed house. Miles snapped his head toward it so fast I thought his neck would crack. He said, "You heard that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Tell me that was a bird." I said, "Birds don't knock." We both sat there staring like idiots. Then it happened again. 4 knocks, like a pattern. Miles whispered, "Man, someone is in there." I said, "There's nowhere to hide. It's open." He said, "No, someone is in the walls." And I almost laughed at that because it sounded insane, but the way he said it, low, like he didn't want the air to hear him, made my stomach go tight. I said, "It's probably boards shifting." Miles said, "There is no wind." And that's when I noticed. He was right. The wind had stopped. Completely. The grass wasn't moving. My shirt stuck to my back with sweat, and the air didn't even feel like air. It felt like warm water. We stood up and walked toward the house because we had to finish the job and because walking toward something feels better than sitting and waiting for it to come to you. I told myself we were being adults about it. We got within 15 feet, and the knocking stopped, like it was listening. Miles called out, "Hey, county crew, if you're in there, you need to come out. This place is not safe." No response. We stepped closer, and I saw my tape measure. It was sitting on a board inside the house, right near the center, like someone placed it there neatly. It wasn't half buried. It wasn't dirty. It was just sitting there like it belonged. Miles said, "See, somebody is messing with you." I said, "No, nobody walked past us. We would have seen." He said, "Maybe they were already in there." I stepped through one of the empty openings, and the moment I crossed the threshold, my ears popped, like pressure change. The air inside smelled different, not rot, not salt. More like a closed room that hasn't been opened in a long time. That didn't make sense because there is no door. There is no closed room. There are gaps everywhere. I reached for the tape measure and my hand started shaking for no reason. I grabbed it and clipped it back on my belt. Then I heard the knock again, right next to my head, from the wall to my left. It wasn't loud, but it was close. I jumped back so hard I nearly fell. Miles laughed nervously and said, "Stop acting like a kid." And then the wall knocked back again, like it answered him. 2 knocks, quick. Miles stopped laughing. His face went pale. He whispered, "Did you do that?" I said, "No." Then we both stood there inside a place that should not be able to hold air the way it was holding it. And we listened. Another knock. Then another. Then a scrape behind us, like footsteps on sand, but when we turned, there was nothing. Miles said, "We need to leave." I said, "We just need to finish these posts and go." Miles said, "No, I mean right now." And I should have listened. I swear to God, I should have listened. But I'm stubborn and stupid. And I didn't want to drive back and explain why we didn't finish, and I didn't want to be the guy who got scared of an old wall. So I stepped back out and started digging again. Miles stood there watching the house like he was watching an animal that might lunge. I told him to start measuring for the next sign placement. He didn't move. He said, "Something is watching us from the openings." I said, "Stop." He said, "I'm telling you, it's not a person, it's like a shape that keeps pulling back when I look at it." I told him he was working himself up. Then I heard it too. Not knocking this time. A sound like breathing, but not from a mouth, from the walls. Like air moving through narrow spaces. I kept digging anyway, and I hate that memory. I hate that I kept digging, because it means I chose it. Around 1:05, we finished the last post, and I said, "Done. We're done. Let's go." Miles didn't answer. He was standing with his back to me, looking into the house. His shoulders were raised like he was tense. I walked up beside him and looked where he was looking. Inside, in the back corner, the dark patch on the wall was darker. And it wasn't flat anymore. It had depth. It looked like a doorway, like a hole cut into the wall. But there was no cut line, no broken brick, just darkness. Then, right as I stared, the darkness moved forward like it was coming toward us, and I saw something that made my mouth go dry. A hand, not a full arm, just a hand shape, pale, pressed against the inside of the wall like it was behind something thin. Like the wall was paper. The fingers were spread and they pushed, and the brick didn't break. It just bulged slightly, like it could bend. Miles made a sound like a cough. I couldn't move. The hand pressed again, and the wall knocked from the inside. One solid knock, and I swear to God it felt like it knocked on my chest. I backed up and grabbed Miles by the elbow and said, "We are leaving." Miles stumbled like he forgot how to walk. We got to the truck, and my hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys once. The moment I started the engine, the wind came back, like someone turned a switch. The grass moved, the air loosened. Birds started making noise, and it almost made me cry because it was so normal. And it meant whatever that was had stopped, or it had decided it didn't need to hide anymore. Miles kept looking behind us as we drove out. He said it followed us to the road. I said, "Stop." He said, "I saw a shadow cross the road behind us, and there was nothing making it." I told him it was a cloud. He said, "There are no clouds." We got back to the yard and tried to act normal. We didn't tell the supervisor because what do you say? The wall knocked, the brick bent, a hand pressed through like wet cloth. They would look at you like you were trying to get out of work. I went home that evening and showered, and I kept looking at the stain on my shirt like it was proof of something. Like if I scrubbed hard enough, I could scrub the day out of my skin. That night, I lay in bed and my ceiling fan clicked, and every click made me think of knocking. I tried to sleep. I started to drift, and then I heard it. 3 knocks, slow, coming from inside my trailer wall by the kitchen. I sat up so fast my back hurt. I held my breath. The trailer was quiet. Then it happened again. 4 knocks, same spacing as at the ruins. I got out of bed and walked barefoot down the hall, and I put my ear to the wall. Nothing. I stepped back and said out loud, "Who is there?" And my voice sounded small in my own home. Then the wall knocked back, 1 knock right where my ear had been. I jumped and hit my elbow on the counter. I stood there shaking, and I swear to God I thought about calling the sheriff, but what would I say? My trailer is being knocked on by a wall. I went outside and walked around with a flashlight. No one, no cars, no footsteps. The night air was still and my neighbors' trailers were dark. I went back inside and sat on my couch until morning with the lights on. At 6:12, the same time I punched in the day before, my phone buzzed with a notification. No service still, but a notification came through anyway, like it found its own way. It was a message, no sender name, just blank, and it said, "Let me out." I stared at it, and my fingers went numb. I deleted it. Then another one came, same blank sender, same words, "Let me out." I turned my phone off. I pulled the battery out even though you're not supposed to be able to do that easy. I sat there with the dead phone in my hand and listened for knocks. None came. The next day at work, Miles didn't show up. He called in sick. The day after that, he didn't show up again. On the 3rd day, he texted me, finally, and all it said was, "Do you hear it at your place?" I didn't answer because I didn't want to write it. I didn't want to make it more real by putting it in words. He sent another message, this time from his number, and it said, "I am not going back out there. I am not. I swear to God I saw it in my mirror last night." I called him and he picked up, but he didn't talk for a long time. I could hear him breathing fast, like he was in a closet. I said, "Miles, talk to me." He whispered, "It knocks when I try to sleep." I said, "In your house?" He said, "In my walls." And then he started crying. And I don't mean sniffles. I mean the kind of crying that makes you sound like you can't breathe. He said, "I tried to cover my ears and it knocked harder like it got mad." I said, "Maybe it's pipes." He said, "No, it spells things." And I froze. I said, "What do you mean spells things?" He said, "It knocks in patterns, like letters, like it wants to talk." I told him he needed to see a doctor, and I hated myself for saying that because it sounded like I didn't believe him. He said, "Don't do that. Don't make me sound crazy. You saw the wall move too." He was right. He said, "I'm going to record it. I'm going to record it so somebody believes me." I begged him not to go chasing it. I said, "Don't make it pay attention to you more." He said, "It already is," and he hung up. That weekend I tried to act like a normal person. I went to the store. I bought oil for my truck. I stood in line and listened to people talk about football and weather and Christmas lights, and it all felt like I was watching through glass. At night, the knocks came again, always in 3s and 4s at first, like a polite person at a door, except there is no door. Then they started moving. That's the part that makes my skin crawl even now. The knocks would start on the living room wall, then a few minutes later on the hallway wall, then behind the bathroom mirror, then under the kitchen sink. Like something walking inside the structure, knocking as it goes, testing for weak spots. I started sleeping in my truck some nights because it felt safer to be surrounded by metal. In the truck, I could still hear it sometimes, faint, like a knuckle tapping glass from far away, but it wasn't as close. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Then, one night around 2:40, I was in the truck and I saw a shape move across my windshield like a person walking past. I sat up and looked, and there was nobody. The streetlight across the lot was on. Nothing moved. Then I heard a knock on the passenger window. One knock, gentle, like someone asking to be let in. I stared at the glass. I could see my own face reflected, pale, eyes wide. I whispered, "No." The window knocked again, 2 knocks, and I swear to God the glass flexed like it was thin. I started the engine and drove around the block like a coward until sunrise. On Monday, Miles showed up at the yard looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red and his hair was sticking up. He walked right up to me and said, "We have to go back." I said, "No." He said, "I recorded it." I said, "I don't want to hear it." He said, "You have to, because it says a place. It says the house. It wants us there." I told him he was out of his mind. He grabbed my arm hard and said, Listen to me. It spelled Indianola. It spelled it with knocks." I said, "Stop." He said, "It wants out. It wants out of the walls. And it knows our names." I told him that last part was impossible. He said, "My wall knocked my name." And he showed me his phone. He had a video, dark, shaky, just his living room wall in the light of a lamp. You could hear the knocking, clear as day. Not pipes, not settling. Knocks that had intention. He had written down the pattern on a piece of paper like a person trying to decode a radio signal. I didn't know if his decoding was real, but I knew the sound was real, and I knew it was the same sound I heard in that collapsed house. I told him, "We need to tell someone official. We need to tell the supervisor, the sheriff, somebody." Miles said, "They'll laugh." He said, "You know they will." He said, "If we go out there at night and film the wall, we can prove it." I said, "That is the worst idea you have ever had." He said, "I can't live like this." And I couldn't argue with that because neither could I. So yes, I went back. I hate admitting that, but I went back because I thought maybe if I faced it, it would stop. I thought maybe it was just some hidden person living out there, some vandal messing with us, something human. We drove out Tuesday night after our shift, around 9:20, because Miles said it only gets loud after midnight. We told nobody where we were going. That was another mistake. We had flashlights, and Miles brought a camera on a little tripod like he was a serious filmmaker. I brought a crowbar because it made me feel less helpless, even though I knew a crowbar is useless against a wall that bends like skin. The drive out there felt different at night. The road signs looked like they were leaning inward, like the dark pulled them. Miles talked the whole time, fast, like if he stopped talking, something would happen. He kept saying, "Dude, I swear to God, just wait. Just wait until you hear it." Like he needed me to share his panic so he didn't drown in it alone. When we turned onto the rough access road, my headlights caught dust hanging in the air, even though there was no wind. It looked like mist, but it was dry. Miles said, "It smells like pennies." And I realized he was right. There was a metallic smell, like blood, but not blood, like wet metal. We parked near the chain and walked in with our lights. The ruins at night are not spooky in a fun way. They're just empty. The dark is thick out there. Your flashlight beam feels small. The collapsed house was a darker shape against the dark, and the openings looked like holes punched in the world. Miles set up his camera facing the house, pointed at one of the openings. He said, "We'll wait and we'll watch the footage later." I said, "Why later?" He said, "Because I don't want to look at it while it happens. That should have been my sign to turn around." We waited. We stood there like two idiots in work boots, sweating in the night, listening to bugs and distant water. At first, nothing happened. Miles started to relax a little. You could see it in his shoulders. He whispered, "Maybe it's not here tonight." I said, "Good. Then we go home." Then, at 11:58, I know the exact time because Miles checked his phone and mouthed it to me, we heard the first knock, one knock from inside the house. Miles froze, his face lit by his screen. Another knock, same spot. Then a third, and then a pause, and then the knocking started moving. It didn't stay on one wall. It traveled along the inside, like something walking and tapping as it went, testing each wall, each corner. Miles whispered, "It's doing it. It's doing it." The camera kept recording. That little red light on, and I remember staring at that red light like it was the only normal thing in the world. Then the sound changed. It wasn't knuckles anymore. It was like someone knocking with the side of their fist, heavier, urgent. 3 knocks, pause, 4 knocks. Pause. 3. Pause. 4. Miles said, "That's the pattern. That's the hello." He said, "It's saying hello." I said, "Stop saying that." Then the house did something that made my knees go weak. One of the openings, the one we had been looking at, narrowed. I don't mean we moved and our angle changed. I mean the brick and wood and whatever was left of that frame pulled inward like a mouth closing. The gap became thinner, like it was trying to become a door again, except there was nothing to close. It was just space shrinking. Miles grabbed my arm and his nails dug into me. He whispered, "It's making a door." I couldn't breathe. The knocking got faster, like excitement. Then, from inside, we heard a voice. Not a clear voice like a person talking normally. A voice like someone speaking through a wall, muffled, forced, like air pushed through cracks. It wasn't words you could understand, not at first. It was syllables, broken, repeating. Miles started crying quietly. I could see tears on his cheeks in the flashlight spill. He whispered, "It's talking." Then the voice hit a shape that sounded like my name, Colton. Not perfectly pronounced, more like Cole, ton. But it was close enough that my stomach turned. I backed up one step without meaning to. The voice repeated, and this time it said it clearer, Colton. Then it said, "Open." Miles whispered, "No, no, no." The knocking slammed hard, right where the opening had narrowed, like something inside hitting the wall with both hands. The camera shook on the tripod because the ground vibrated. I felt it in my boots. And then I saw the shadow. The same kind of shadow from the daytime video. A human-shaped shadow, stepping forward through the space that was closing. Like it didn't care what the opening did because it wasn't using the opening the way a person uses it. It moved like it was sliding, like it was being pulled. It didn't have details. No face, no clothes, no features, just a darker human outline against dark. But it had weight because the sand shifted under it, and I saw that. I saw the sand move as if feet had pressed down. Miles choked out, "Run!" and I finally listened. I grabbed his shirt and yanked him back, and we stumbled toward the access road. Behind us, the knocking became furious, like something in a cage. The voice kept pushing at the air, saying, "Open, open," and then it said, "Let me out." And I swear to God that is exactly what my phone message said days before. We ran until our lungs burned. We got to the chain and fumbled with it. And that's when the worst part happened. The part that rewired my brain for good. My truck keys were not in my pocket. They had been. I checked them 3 times before we walked in. They were gone. Miles patted his pockets too, frantic. He said, "You have them." I said, "I did." Then we heard footsteps behind us, slow, deliberate, on sand. Not running, coming. And no flashlight beam, no body, just the sound. Step, step. And then a knock, not on a wall. On the metal chain post next to us, one sharp knock like a knuckle on steel. Miles screamed my name without meaning to, and I grabbed the chain and rattled it like that would do anything. Then my truck headlights turned on by themselves, down the road where the truck was parked, like someone clicked the switch. The lights washed the path in pale white, and in that light, I saw something I cannot forget. I saw my truck door open, slow, like a careful person. Then I saw a shadow climb into the driver's seat. Not a person you could identify, just that same dark outline, but sitting like it knew how. The truck engine started. I heard it. My own truck, idling. Then the truck began to roll forward, not fast, just a slow creep. Headlights aimed right at us like eyes. Miles started praying under his breath, not loud, just rapid words. I couldn't move. I stood there staring at my own vehicle moving without me, and I knew in that moment we were not dealing with a prank, not dealing with a vandal, not dealing with some guy living out there. The truck rolled up to the chain and stopped, perfectly aligned, like it had parked there before. The driver door opened again, and on the seat, in the exact center like someone placed it neatly, were my keys. They sat there on the fabric, gleaming in the light. An offering. Miles whispered. Don't take them. I said, we have to. The footsteps on sand came again behind us, closer now, and the metallic smell thickened. I ran to the truck, grabbed the keys, and the moment my fingers touched them, the horn blared once, loud enough to make my ears ring. I dropped the keys, snatched them up again, and jammed them into the ignition with shaking hands. Miles was already in the passenger side, curled up like he was trying to disappear. I slammed the door, started the engine, and the truck didn't move at first. It idled, but it wouldn't go into gear, like the shifter was stuck. I yanked it, and it finally shifted, and we tore out of there, tires spinning sand. In my rear-view mirror, I saw the collapsed house openings, and for a second, just a second, I saw them arranged differently, like the house had more doorways than it should, like it was growing mouths. Miles kept saying, don't look, just drive. We didn't talk on the way back. We drove to my place because Miles said he couldn't go home. He said his walls would be waiting. He sat on my couch staring at nothing. Around 3:05, the knocks started in my trailer, and they were not polite anymore. They were hard, rapid, moving from wall to wall like something searching. Miles started shaking and said, it followed. I said, it was already here. Then, and I swear to God, the bathroom door, which was closed, opened by itself, slow, like someone easing it open from the inside. There was nobody. The mirror above the sink fogged over even though no hot water was running. And on that fog, letters appeared as if traced by a finger. Not perfect letters, but clear enough. Let me out. Miles stood up like he was going to faint. He whispered, it wants out of something. It's trapped. It's trapped in the walls, in the place, in the spaces, and it wants us to open whatever it is. I didn't answer because my throat wouldn't work. The knocking slammed once, so hard my cabinets rattled. Then it stopped, all at once, like it was listening again. Miles looked at me and said, we can't ignore it. I said, we have to. He said, no, we have to do something or it will keep coming. I told him to stay the night, that in the morning we would figure it out. We didn't sleep. We sat with the lights on, and every small sound made us jump. At 6:12, my phone, which had been off, turned on by itself and lit up with a single new message from that blank sender. It said, doors. Miles started sobbing. He said, it's telling us what it needs. I said, I don't care what it needs. I said, we are not giving it anything. Miles stared at the message like it was a command. He kept repeating, doors, 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 like his brain got stuck. At some point, I must have dozed because the next thing I remember is sunlight through the blinds and my neck stiff from sleeping upright, and Miles was gone. His shoes were gone. His phone was gone. My front door was open. I ran outside yelling his name like an idiot, but there was no sign of him. No dust trail, no car, nothing. I called him, no answer. I called his sister, and she said she hadn't heard from him. I drove to his place. His truck was there. His door was locked. The curtains were drawn. I knocked and got no response. I went back to work and told the supervisor Miles was missing. They made calls. They filed things. They asked me questions. I didn't tell them the truth. I said maybe he took off. I said maybe he had a breakdown. Saying those words made me feel like I was betraying him, but I couldn't say what really happened because I still don't know how to say it without sounding like a man who needs to be put away. 2 days later, they found Miles's camera. Not at his house, not in his truck. They found it out at the Indianola ruins, sitting on the ground facing the collapsed house like someone placed it carefully. The memory card was still in it. A deputy watched the footage first, and then my supervisor called me into his office and shut the door. He looked pale. He said, Colton, what were you doing out there at night? I said, I wasn't. He said, your truck is on the footage. He said, you and Miles are on the footage. I felt my heart slam. He said, the footage is strange. He said, it shows you running, it shows your truck moving, it shows lights turning on, and then it shows something else. He didn't want to describe it. He just slid his phone across the desk with a clip loaded. I watched it with my hands sweating. The camera view was shaky, but clear enough. I saw us standing by the house. I heard the knocking. I heard the voice say, "Open." I heard my name. Then I saw the shadow step forward. Then I saw us run. Then I saw my truck headlights turn on. Then, for one frame, one single frame, the camera caught the inside of the collapsed house through the narrowing opening. And in that frame, there were rows of hands pressing against the walls from the inside. Dozens of them. Pale shapes pushing, like people trapped behind brick like it was skin. Then the frame blurred, and the view shifted, and it was gone. My supervisor yanked the phone back like it burned him. He said, "I don't know what that is, but you are not going back out there." He said, "We're closing off that area, and the sheriff is handling it." I nodded like a robot and walked out. They never found Miles. Officially, he's missing. People say he ran off. People say drugs. People say debt. People say all the normal things people say when they need a normal reason. I know what happened. I don't know where he is, but I know what happened. Because after he disappeared, the knocks changed in my trailer. They became weaker at first, like something tired. Then they started again. But now, sometimes, between the knocks, I hear a muffled voice that sounds like Miles. Not a clear voice. A voice through a wall, through insulation, through something thick. I'll be sitting there with the TV on low, trying to pretend I'm fine, and I'll hear it, faint, like someone talking from inside the studs. It says my name sometimes. It says, "Colton, open." And when it says open, the knocks answer it from somewhere else, like a call and response. I told myself it was my grief playing tricks. I told myself it was my brain making patterns because it couldn't accept he was gone. Then one night, I was in the bathroom and I heard 3 knocks under the sink. I crouched down and opened the cabinet because I don't know why. Because I'm stupid, and I wanted to prove to myself there was nothing there. The smell hit me first, that metallic smell, like pennies. Then I saw my tape measure sitting under the sink, neatly placed, even though I was wearing it on my belt. I looked down, and it was gone from my belt. I grabbed it from under the sink and clipped it back on, and I felt sick because it meant whatever this is can reach into my life and rearrange it like tools on a bench. It can take and return. It can place things neatly. It can mimic habits. It can learn. After that, I stopped fixing things in my trailer. I stopped hammering nails. I stopped hanging pictures. I stopped doing anything that involved making openings in walls because every time I touched a wall with a tool, the knocking would start. Softer at first, like excitement, then harder, like begging. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom because the bedroom wall knocks are the worst. I sleep in my truck sometimes, but even the truck isn't safe anymore. Twice, I've found my keys on the driver's seat in the morning, even though I put them in my pocket before bed. Once, I found the passenger door ajar like someone sat there during the night. There were no footprints outside, no sign. Just that door not fully latched, like a careful person forgot. I told myself to move. I looked at apartments inland. I tried. I filled out forms. But every time I start packing a box, the knocks start in my closet wall, right behind the box, like it knows what I'm doing. Like it doesn't want me to leave, or it wants to come with me, or it already is with me. I tried staying at my cousin's place one weekend, 2 towns over. First night, fine. Second night, at 6:12, his hallway wall knocked 3 times, and my cousin asked me what that was. I lied and said pipes. He said, "We don't have pipes in that wall." I left at sunrise and drove back because I'd rather be haunted alone than watch it spread into someone else's house. I don't go near Indianola anymore. I don't even drive that direction. If I see a coastal windbreak or saltgrass, my hands start sweating on the wheel. The county put up barricades and signs and a chain and cameras, and people still sneak in because people always do. I've seen new videos online, people laughing, filming the house, saying, "Look, there's no doors, look at the shadow," and they think it's a fun scare. Sometimes I want to comment and tell them to stop, to leave. to never knock on those walls, to never answer if it knocks back. But I don't. I just watch and feel my stomach drop because I can hear it through their phones, even in the videos, faint under their laughing, that same pattern. 3 knocks, 4 knocks, like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to anybody. And the worst part, the part I haven't told anyone because it makes me feel like I'm going to throw up, is what happened last week. I came home from work, normal day, nothing weird, and I noticed my front door was unlocked. I always lock it. I stood there with my hand on the knob, listening. No TV sound, no movement. I stepped inside and saw my kitchen chair pulled out like someone had been sitting. On the table, right in the center, was a doorknob. Old, brass, scratched, no door attached. Just the knob and a short rod like it had been yanked out of something. I don't own that. It wasn't mine. I picked it up and it was warm. Warm like a hand. My throat went tight and I whispered, "No." Then the wall by the kitchen knocked once, slow, like agreement. I put the doorknob down and backed away. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it came from that collapsed house, if it came from some other door somewhere, if it came from nothing. But I know what it means because the message on my phone came right after, even though my phone had no service, even though I keep it on airplane mode half the time now. One new message from that blank sender. It said, "One more." I threw my phone across the room and it hit the wall. And when it hit, the wall knocked back like it enjoyed the impact. I don't know what one more means. One more door, one more knob, one more opening, one more person. I don't know. I just know it's patient, and it's learning how we live, and it's using our normal habits like handles. I'm telling you this at 3 o'clock behind my trailer because I can't hold it in anymore, because every night I listen to my walls and I feel like I'm waiting for something to push through from the inside. Not with force, but with permission. Like all it needs is for me to give it the idea of a door, and it will do the rest. I swear to God, sometimes when I'm drifting off, I hear Miles again. Clearer, like he's closer to the surface, like he's right behind the sheetrock. He'll say, "Colton, please," and then the knocks answer him, and then the voice that is not Miles will say, "Open," and it will say it like it's my job, like I owe it, like I already started something the day I stepped into that house to grab my tape measure. No, wait, that wasn't when it started. It was earlier when the lock was warm, when those footprints ended in the sand, when the openings looked too tall and too narrow, like the place had been waiting for someone to notice. I keep thinking if I had just left it alone, if I had just driven away, maybe it would have stayed a rumor in the ruins. But I didn't. I went back, and now it knows my schedule. It knows 612. It knows my truck, it knows my name, and I don't know how to make it forget me. I have tried ignoring it and it knocks louder. I have tried yelling at it and it knocks back like it's amused. I have tried praying and it spells words on fog like it can read over my shoulder. I don't have answers. I only have proof that I can't show anyone without sounding insane, and the proof keeps changing places like it has legs. The doorknob is still on my table. I put it in a drawer, and it was back on the table the next morning. Warm. I wrapped it in a towel and shoved it in a box in my closet, and the box was open when I got home, and the towel was folded neatly on the floor like someone took their time. I don't go into my closet anymore. I don't open doors in my own place unless I have to. I leave cabinets open. I leave rooms lit. I sit where I can see the hallway. I flinch at any small sound. And if you're listening and you ever go out to those Indianola ruins at night, if you ever stand by that collapsed house with no doors and you hear knocking from inside the walls like somebody wants out, do not knock back. Do not call out. Do not step through those openings like they're normal doorways. Because it isn't trying to scare you. It's trying to learn you. It's trying to get you to help it. And once it uses your hands, you don't get them back the same way. I'm telling you, I swear to God, it doesn't need a door to enter. It needs a door for something else to leave, and I think it's collecting pieces, knobs, locks, habits, hours, and I don't know how many more it needs. I only know it keeps asking for one more, and I keep hearing Miles in the wall like he's running out of air. I keep getting calls from the wrong mile marker. My name's Wade Kincaid. I'm from the little stretch outside Sanderson where the wind never stops, and the houses sit far enough apart that you can shout and nobody answers. And I work as a pipeline right-of-way inspector, the kind of job that means you drive alone for hours checking fences, valves, gauges, and washouts. And listen, I am not telling you this because I want attention. I am telling you because I am awake again at 3 in the morning behind my trailer with my phone shaking in my hands, and I keep thinking if I get it out of my mouth, it will stop crawling around in my head. And I keep looking over my shoulder like somebody is going to step out of the dark and tell me to hush. And there is nobody out here. That's the problem. It is always nobody. Until it is not. And I swear to God I have not slept right since the first night it happened. So I'm going to start with the boring part, the normal part, the part that still feels like it belonged to somebody else. I woke up that day with my mouth dry and grit in my teeth like I'd been chewing sand in my sleep. I made oatmeal because it's cheap and it sits heavy enough to keep you going. I put too much cinnamon. It clumped. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter in my socks, and the socks had holes at the toes, and I remember noticing the holes because I was already annoyed, and I was wearing my pale blue work shirt with the little reflective strips on the shoulders, and there's a dark stain on the left sleeve from hydraulic fluid that never comes out. It looks like a bruise, and I remember rolling that sleeve up and seeing it and thinking I should buy a new shirt, and I didn't, because you don't waste money out here if you can help it, and I clocked in at 4:47 p.m. because dispatch texted late. Just one line. Need eyes on line segment. South Loop. Pressure flutter complaints. Go before midnight. And I texted back, copy. And I threw my tool bag in the truck, and I grabbed my flashlight and my clipboard and a spare battery pack. And I remember the battery pack because it gets weird later. And I drove out, and the sky was still bright. But it had that late day glare, where everything looks washed out like you're squinting through water, and the air was dead still, drought still. No breeze, which is rare out here, and that kind of stillness always makes you feel like you're the only moving thing on earth. And I told myself it was just a quick run. Check the valve sites, check the right-of-way markers, listen for leaks, and come back. And I was in a decent mood, man. I even had the radio on low, and I was thinking about nothing heavy, just whether I had enough gas and whether my tires were going to hate the gravel road. And I took the turnoff that looks like nothing, just a broken fence line and a cattle guard. And I drove for miles where there are no houses, no lights, just scrub and rock and that long pipeline corridor cut through like a scar. And I know that route. I've driven it 100 times. I could do it with my eyes half shut. And that's why what happened messes with me so bad. Because it was my regular place, my regular job, my regular night, and it turned wrong like somebody flipped a sign on a door when you weren't looking. The first site I checked was a small valve station with a chain link fence and a lock that always sticks. And I fought it for a minute and finally got it open. And the inside smelled like sun-baked metal and old grease. And the gauge needle was bouncing just a hair. Not enough to panic, but enough to notice. And I wrote it down, and I took a photo for the report, and everything was fine. And then I drove to the next marker, and that's where the first wrong detail hit. Not big, just a pinprick. I pulled up to a mile marker post that should have had a faded number plate screwed to it, and it was gone. Just clean bolt holes, like somebody had removed it recent. And I stood there staring at the holes, and I remember saying out loud, "That's new." And my voice sounded too loud in the still air, and I told myself maybe a storm tore it off, maybe somebody stole it for scrap. People do dumb stuff. So I shrugged and kept going, and I checked the next marker, and that one had the plate, but the number was wrong. I know it was wrong because I've been filling these reports forever, and I even tapped the plate with my finger like it would fix itself. And I looked around like maybe I'd turned off too early. But the landscape matched, the bends in the corridor matched, the fence line matched, the little cluster of rocks that looked like a broken tooth matched. And still the number plate was wrong. And I felt that little cold pinch in my stomach. And I told myself, okay, maybe they renumbered and nobody told you. And I laughed once, like a quick, dumb laugh, because that's the kind of thing that happens paperwork changes, and you find out last. And I drove on, and the sun went down faster than I expected. Like the light got pulled out from under the sky, and the air got cooler, not cold, just that dry night cool that makes your skin feel tight. And I started seeing the corridor reflect in my headlights like a pale ribbon. And I stopped at a third site, another fence station, and the lock was open, hanging loose. And that's not normal. We keep those locked, always. And my first thought was kids or vandals. And my second thought was, I don't want to deal with this. Because if there's damage, that's hours of calls and photos and reports, and I walked in anyway. And my boots sounded sharp on the gravel inside the fence, and the metal gate creaked like it always does. And I shined my flashlight around, and nothing looked broken. Nothing looked moved. And I checked the gauge, and the needle was steady, which made me feel better. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, expecting dispatch asking for an update. And it was a missed call from no caller ID. And I don't answer those. I never do, so I ignored it, and then I got a voicemail notification instantly, like the voicemail had been left before the call even finished ringing. And I stared at it, and my skin prickled, because I had barely felt the buzz, and it already had a voicemail. And I did a stupid thing. I played it right there because sometimes it's just a robocall, and I wanted to clear it. And what I heard was not a voice. It was wind and a faint clicking sound like a loose wire tapping metal. And then, very quiet, a single beep, like the start of a recorded message. And then silence, and the voicemail ended. And I stood there in the fence station under my flashlight beam with my phone against my ear, feeling foolish. And I said, "Okay." And I put it away, and I went back to my truck. And I noticed my headlights were dimmer, like the battery was struggling. And that annoyed me, because my truck's been fine. And I started it, and it turned over slow for a second before catching. And I told myself my battery's aging. And I drove on, and now it's full dark. No moon bright enough to matter. Just a clean black sky with stars that looked too sharp. And the road ahead was a narrow tunnel in the headlights. And the corridor posts flashed by like teeth. And I was alone. Truly alone, which is normal for me. I like alone. I prefer it. But that night the alone felt different. It felt like a room with a door shut behind you. And I kept having the urge to check my mirror, even though there's never anybody behind me out there. And I told myself I was just tired. And then I hit a spot in the road where the gravel changes to hard-packed caliche for a stretch. And my tires made a different sound. And right there, my phone buzzed again. And I looked down at the screen and the time read 11:58 p.m. And I remember that exact time because it's the kind of time you notice. It's close to midnight. And the dispatch text said, "Go before midnight." And I thought, I'm cutting it close. And then the phone rang again. No caller ID again. And I didn't answer, and it stopped after one ring. And the voicemail notification popped up again instantly, and I felt my throat tighten. And I told myself, don't play it. Don't do it. Just finish the route. Go home. And I drove. And then something happened that I still don't know how to explain without sounding like I'm lying. The road sign that marks the turn back toward the highway appeared in my headlights. And I hit the brakes because it shouldn't have been there yet. It was too soon. I hadn't driven far enough, and the sign was wrong. It wasn't the normal faded reflective sign with bullet holes. It was clean, like new, and it had the wrong arrow, pointing left instead of right. And I sat there with my foot on the brake staring at it, and my breath sounded loud in the cab. And I did that thing you do when you're trying to prove you're awake. I looked around. I touched the steering wheel. I blinked hard, and the sign didn't change. It stayed there, clean and wrong. And I felt that cold pinch in my stomach turn into something heavier, and I said out loud, "This is not the turn." And right then my phone buzzed again, and the screen lit. And it wasn't a call. It was a text message from an unknown number. Just one line. "You missed your marker." And I stared at it, and my hands went sweaty, and I checked the signal bars, and there were none. No service out there. Never is. And yet I had a text, and my brain tried to fix it by saying maybe the message queued and came through late. Maybe I had a bar for a second, but the message wasn't from dispatch. It wasn't from a known number, and it felt like it was aimed at me like a finger poke. And I started to get angry, because fear and anger sit close together in my chest. And I texted back, "Who is this?" And the moment I hit send, the message showed as delivered, which should not happen with no service. And the hair on my arms lifted, and I swallowed hard, and I turned the truck around because I didn't trust that sign, and I drove back the way I came. And I told myself I probably passed the marker without noticing because I was distracted, and that's all. And I drove back to where the caliche section was, and I looked for the marker posts and the fence and the little cluster of rocks. And the cluster of rocks was gone. Not moved, gone, like the ground was smoother. And the corridor posts looked the same, but the numbers were wrong again. And I slowed down, and my headlights washed over a mile marker plate that said a number I have never seen on that route. And I felt my face go hot, and I said, "No. And my voice cracked, and I pulled over and got out, and the night air hit me, dry and sharp. And it was so quiet I could hear my truck engine ticking. And I walked up to the marker post and shined my flashlight on it. And the bolts were fresh, not rusted, like the plate had been installed recently. And my stomach turned, and I walked a few steps down the corridor, and the gravel under my boots sounded too crisp. And I suddenly had that feeling, that certainty, that I was being watched by something I could not see, not like a person hiding, like the air itself had eyes. And I stopped walking, and the feeling didn't go away. It sat on my neck, and I said, "Listen," because I didn't know who I was talking to. And then I realized I could hear a faint clicking again, the same clicking from the voicemail, like a loose wire tapping metal, and it was coming from somewhere ahead in the dark corridor. And I froze, and I held my breath, and the clicking stopped, and I let my breath out, and the clicking started again, and it matched my breathing like it was listening, and my skin went cold, and I backed toward my truck, and my boots scuffed the gravel, and the scuff sounded wrong, like it echoed a half-second late, like the ground was repeating me. And I got back in the truck and locked the doors, which is dumb out there. Nobody's trying door handles in the desert, and I sat there with my hands on the wheel and my heart thudding. And I looked at my phone again, and the time still read 11:58 p.m., and I watched the seconds, and the seconds weren't moving. The display stayed frozen, and I felt my mouth go dry, and I whispered, "That's not right." And right then my dashboard clock blinked, and it also showed 11:58, and it stayed there. And I started laughing, a short, broken laugh, because what else do you do when your clocks lie to your face? And I turned the key off and on, and the dashboard reset, and the clock still came back 11:58. And I felt something tighten behind my eyes like a headache forming. And my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from no caller ID, and I did not play it. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat like it was hot, and I put the truck in gear, and I drove. And I told myself, I'm going back to the highway. I'm going back to where the world behaves. And I drove until my headlights caught the highway sign, and I felt relief flood my chest. And then I noticed the sign was wrong too. The letters were slightly off, like someone painted them from memory. The spacing wrong, the reflective backing dull, and that relief died, and my hands started shaking on the wheel, and I drove onto the highway anyway, because a road is a road. And I kept going, and I expected to see lights, to see a distant town glow. And there was nothing, just more dark. And my gas gauge dropped faster than it should, and I started to panic. Not screaming panic. That quiet panic where your thoughts start skipping. And I turned on my interior light, and my face looked pale in the rear view, and my eyes looked too wide. And I said, "Okay. And my voice sounded like someone pretending. And then I saw a mile marker on the side of the highway. And I felt a small relief because those are fixed, those are real, and the mile marker number was wrong. It was a number that belongs far east, nowhere near me. And I whispered, "No," and my throat tightened, and my phone buzzed again, and this time it was a text. Same unknown number. Turn around at 11:58. And my stomach dropped because it was like it knew I was watching the time. And I looked at my phone, and it still said 11:58. And the night around me felt like a trap closing. And I turned the truck around on the shoulder like a fool, risking a blowout, because the message had a command in it, and my brain was looking for any rule to follow, any rule that might get me out. And I drove back the way I came, and I told myself, you're just turned around, you're disoriented, you're tired. And then my headlights caught something in the road ahead, a reflective orange vest, and I slammed the brakes, and my tires skidded on the asphalt, and I stopped. And in the headlights, there was a man standing in the lane, facing away from me, wearing a reflective vest like mine, same strips, and I sat there frozen, because nobody should be out there. And I rolled my window down a crack, and I called out, "Hey, you all right?" And the man didn't turn. He just stood there, and the reflective strips shone bright, and I noticed his posture was wrong, too still, like a mannequin, and my skin crawled, and I said louder, "Hey!" And he slowly lifted his hand and pointed down at the ground in front of him, like he wanted me to look, and my eyes followed his hand, and in the beam I saw a mile marker post lying on its side in the road, snapped off at the base, and the number plate on it was missing, just clean bolt holes, and my stomach tightened, and I whispered, "That was the first wrong thing." And I did not mean to say it. It came out like a confession, and the man in the vest began to turn his head, not his body. Just his head in a slow, stiff motion, like his neck was tight, and I saw the side of his face, and it was pale and blank. And then he turned fully, and I swear to God, dude, it was not a face I could hold in my mind. It was like my eyes slid off it, like the details wouldn't stick. I could see a mouth, I could see eyes, but they didn't register as a person. They registered as something trying to look like a person, and my heart slammed in my chest, and I hit the gas. I didn't think, I just hit it, and my truck lurched forward, and the man did not move out of the way. He didn't jump, he didn't flinch. And in that split second, my brain screamed, "You're about to kill somebody." And I jerked the wheel, and I missed him by inches, and my truck bounced on the shoulder, and I heard something scrape under my chassis, and then I was past him, and I looked in the mirror, and the road behind was empty. No man, no vest, nothing, just dark. And my hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep the truck straight, and my mouth went numb, and I kept driving. And then my phone started playing audio on its own from the passenger seat, speaker loud. And it was the voicemail. And I tried to grab it and stop it, and my fingers fumbled. And the audio was that clicking. And then a voice, not a normal voice, not a monster voice, just a tired, flat voice, like someone on a bad connection. And it said, "Wade Kincaid." And my skin went cold. And the voice said, "You missed your marker." And I yelled, "Stop!" And my voice cracked. And the audio stopped instantly like it obeyed. And then my dashboard lights dimmed, and my headlights dimmed, and my engine sputtered, and my truck started losing speed. And I felt panic rise hot. Because out there, you do not want to stall. You do not want to be stuck. And I slapped the steering wheel and said, "Come on." And the truck coughed and kept going, but slower. And the time on the dash still said 11:58. And I whispered, "It's keeping me here." And the moment I whispered that, the time flipped to 12 o'clock a.m., and I felt a pressure in my ears like a pop, and the world seemed to settle, like a held breath released, and my headlights brightened, and the engine smoothed out, and I almost cried from relief. And then my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification, and I didn't touch it, and I drove all the way home. And when I got to my trailer park, I could see porch lights. I could see a neighbor's TV glow through curtains. I could see a dog sleeping under a truck, and I felt real again. And I went inside and locked the door, and I sat on my couch in my work clothes because I didn't trust myself to go to bed. And I stared at my phone on the coffee table like it was a snake. And I told myself I'm not playing the voicemail. I'm not. And I still played it, because curiosity is a sickness too. And the voicemail started with the clicking, then a faint hum like electrical noise, then my own breathing. and I sat up straight because I wasn't recording my breathing. I wasn't. And then the tired voice said, "Turn around at 11:58. And then there was a sound of tires on gravel, and then a faint metallic scrape. And then the voice said, "You saw the vest." And I felt my stomach drop because it wasn't guessing. It was describing my night like it had been sitting in my cab. And then the voice said something that made my skin crawl. It said, "You know this road?" And after it said that, the voicemail ended, and my phone screen showed a new saved audio file in my recordings, and the file name was Marker. And I did not make that file, and I opened it, and it was a recording of a man's voice. My voice saying, "I missed my marker," over and over in a calm tone, like practicing, and I slammed the phone down like it burned, and I stood up and paced my little trailer, and my boots thumped on the cheap laminate floor, and every time I stepped I felt like the ground repeated me a half-second late, and I stopped pacing and held my breath, and the repeating sensation stopped, and I let my breath out, and it started again. And I stood there frozen in my living room, and I realized the clicking was in my trailer, not on the phone, in the air, faint, coming from the hallway by my bedroom like a loose wire tapping metal. And I stared down the hallway, and it looked normal, just a narrow hall with a picture frame and a laundry basket. And the clicking stopped when I held my breath, and it started when I breathed, and I whispered, "Man," and my voice shook. And I walked down the hallway slow, and the clicking grew louder, and I reached the bedroom door, and it was shut, and I put my hand on the knob, and it was cold, colder than it should have been, like it had been in a fridge, and I pulled it open, and my room was dark, and my bed was unmade, and nothing looked wrong, and then my phone buzzed on the coffee table behind me, and the tired voice played through the speaker without me touching it, just one phrase, "Wrong room." And I slammed my bedroom door shut so hard the picture frame rattled, and I backed away, and my heart was pounding, and I slept with all the lights on that night. Not real sleep, just sitting, dozing, waking, dozing. And every time I looked at my phone, it said 11:58, even at 2 in the morning, even at 3. And I told myself the phone was broken, so I shut it off, powered down, and the clicking in the hallway stopped, and I felt relief. And then I heard the clicking again, and I realized it was now coming from inside my closet, a soft tap, tap, tap like a wire hitting a wall. And I stood there staring at my closet door, and I said out loud, "No," and my voice cracked, and I didn't open it. I didn't. I sat back down on the couch, and I stared at the dark closet, like it was a mouth. And the clicking went on for hours, stopping when I held my breath, starting when I breathed, like it was teaching me that it could measure me by air. And around dawn, the clicking stopped, and I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is sunlight through my blinds and my phone on the coffee table turned on again even though I powered it off. And the screen showed 11:58 like it was stuck, and there were 3 new voicemails from no caller ID, all time-stamped 11:58, and my throat tightened. And I checked my call log, and it showed I had made an outgoing call at 11:58 to a number I didn't recognize. And the call duration was 8 minutes, and I felt sick, because I didn't call anyone. I was sitting there with the lights on, and I listened to one of the voicemails, and it was not a message. It was the sound of my truck engine idling, and the sound of gravel under tires, and the sound of my own voice talking very calmly, saying, "I'm at the marker." And then the tired voice saying, "Read it." And then a pause, and then my own voice reading numbers that sounded like mile markers, and then the tired voice saying, "Good," like approving. And I sat there in my trailer in daylight with my stomach rolling, thinking, I wasn't there, I wasn't driving, I wasn't reading anything, and I started doubting my own night. And that's the worst part, man. The way your brain tries to stitch it into something that makes sense, like maybe I sleepwalked, maybe I blacked out, maybe I dreamed it. But you don't dream call logs, you don't dream new files named Marker, you don't dream the scrape sound under your chassis and then find a fresh gouge the next day, because I crawled under my truck and there it was. A bright scrape line on the metal like something dragged hard, and the bolt holes on the marker post in the voicemail. Those clean bolt holes. I could not get that image out of my head, and I tried to do the responsible thing. I called dispatch and I said, "Hey, the signage is wrong out there. Markers missing plates, locks open, something's off." And dispatch laughed like I was being picky, and they said, "We ain't touched that segment, just file your report." And I said, "Someone is messing with the markers." And dispatch said, "Probably kids." And I said, "Out there." And dispatch said, "You want overtime or not?" And I felt my face go hot, because that's how it works. You complain, and they remind you you're replaceable. So I said, "Copy," and I hung up. And I told myself, I'm not going back at night. I'm not. I'll go in daylight if I have to. And for 2 days I avoided that segment. I found excuses. I did other tasks. I checked other lines, and I almost started to feel normal again. Until the third night when I was sitting on my couch watching some dumb show low volume, trying to keep my brain busy, and my phone buzzed at 11:58, and the screen lit with a text from the unknown number, "You are late." And my stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my knees, and the closet in my hallway clicked once, like a tap from inside, and I stared at it, and I whispered, "I'm not going." And the clicking started, faster than before, like impatient, and my phone buzzed again with another text, "Go to the vest." And my skin went cold, and I stood up without deciding, like my body moved before my brain, and I grabbed my keys. And I hate that. I hate admitting that. But it felt like the easiest path was to obey, like a tired part of me wanted the rule, wanted the instruction, and I drove. And my hands were sweating on the wheel, and I kept saying out loud, I'm just checking, like that made it okay. And the road out there looked normal at first, and my phone showed real time, 10:33, 10:54, and I almost relaxed. And then, as I turned onto the corridor road, my phone jumped to 11:58, like it skipped ahead, and my dashboard clock blinked and also showed 11:58. And the air outside the cab went dead still again. No wind, no insect sound, nothing, like the world muted itself, and I felt that watched feeling settle on my neck. And I drove to the spot where I had seen the wrong sign, and the sign was there again, clean and wrong, pointing left, and my headlights washed over it, and the reflective paint looked new enough to sting your eyes. And I sat there with the engine running and my breath loud, and I waited, because I didn't know what else to do, and my phone rang. No caller ID, one ring, voicemail, and the voicemail auto-played through the speaker without my touching it. And the tired voice said, "Get out." And my stomach clenched, and I whispered, "No." And the voice said, "You missed your marker." And then I heard it, not from the phone, from outside. That clicking sound, tap, 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 like a wire hitting metal, coming from the corridor ahead. And I stared through the windshield, and I could see nothing but dark scrub and the pale corridor strip. And then my headlights caught movement, a reflective strip, and my heart jumped, because there it was, the vest, the same reflective vest, standing in the road again, facing away. And I sat frozen, and the voice on the speaker said, "Read it." And my hands started shaking, and I whispered, "Dude." And I opened my door and stepped out, because something in me thought maybe if I do it fast, it ends, like ripping off a bandage. And the night air hit me, and it smelled like hot dust and metal. And it was so quiet, my ears rang, and my boots crunched gravel as I walked toward the vest. And the figure didn't move, and the reflective strips shone too bright, and the clicking sound came from near his shoulders, like something tapping his vest. And I walked up until I was a few feet away, and I said, "Hey," and my voice cracked, and the figure slowly lifted his hand and pointed down again. And in the beam, I saw the mile marker post lying there, snapped. And this time the number plate was not missing. It was there, and it was blank. No number printed, just a reflective rectangle like a mirror. And my stomach rolled, and the tired voice on my truck speaker said, "That one." And I realized I could still hear it even though I was outside, like the truck speaker was talking into the night. And I bent down and picked up the marker plate, and it was heavier than it should have been, cold, like it had been in water. And as I held it, I saw my own reflection in it, warped. And behind my reflection, I saw the corridor posts, and the posts in the reflection were not the same as the posts in front of me. In the reflection, there were more of them, closer together, like the corridor was compressed and my skin went cold. And I looked up from the plate to the figure in the vest, and his face, man, his face still wouldn't stick in my mind, but I could tell he was looking at me now, and his mouth opened and a sound came out. Not a word, just a breathy static sound. And the clicking got faster, and my phone buzzed in my pocket even though there was no service, and I pulled it out, and the screen showed a text, "Read your name." And my throat tightened, and I whispered, "No." And my own voice came from the truck speaker far behind me, calm, saying, "My name's Wade Kincaid," like it was reading me, and the figure in the vest began to step toward me. One slow step, and his boots, I heard his boots, and the sound was wrong, like a boot stepping on a hollow floor, not gravel, like the ground under him was not the same ground under me, and the marker plate in my hand vibrated slightly like it was alive, and my stomach dropped, and I turned and ran back to my truck, and my boots slipped on loose rock, and I almost fell, and the clicking followed behind me, not fast, just steady. Tap, 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 like it didn't need to hurry. And I got to the truck and slammed the door and locked it, and my breath came in short bursts. And my phone screen showed 11:58 again, frozen, and the tired voice said through the speaker, "Late." And then my headlights dimmed, and my engine sputtered, and my truck felt like it was sinking into the ground, like the tires were softening, and I yelled, "Stop!" And my voice cracked, and the clicking stopped for a second. And then I heard something new, a faint sound like pages flipping, like paper being riffled. And it came from the back seat where my clipboard was, and I jerked my head around, and my clipboard was sitting upright on its own, pages turning without wind, and my report sheet flipped to a blank page. And on the blank page, in neat block letters, my last name was written Kincaid, and my stomach rolled, and I whispered, "I didn't write that." And the tired voice said, "Read it." And the letters on the page shifted slightly, like the ink was wet, and my hands started shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. And I felt trapped in that moment, in that frozen minute. And I did something I'm ashamed of. I read it, not loud, just under my breath. Kincaid. And the moment I said it, the dashboard clock flipped to 12 o'clock, and the headlights brightened, and the engine smoothed, and the pressure in my ears popped again like the world reset, and I started the truck and drove, and I did not look in the mirror, because I couldn't stand the thought of seeing that vest behind me. And the whole drive home, my phone kept buzzing with texts I did not read. And when I got home, I threw the clipboard in my sink like it was dirty, and I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I started crying without making sound, just tears running. Because I felt like I had given it something, like I had signed something without ink. And the next morning, my dispatch log showed I had filed a report at 11:58 p.m., and the report had perfect marker numbers listed, numbers I have never seen, and attached photos. And one photo was of the blank marker plate in my hand, taken from outside the truck, like somebody stood there and photographed me. And my face in the photo was turned slightly away like I was listening. And behind me in the dark, there was a faint reflective strip like the vest. And I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. And I deleted it. And it came back. And I deleted it again. And it came back again. And I turned my phone off, and it turned back on at 11:58 that night by itself. And that's when it started happening every night. Always the same pattern. The phone jumps to 11:58. The no caller ID call rings once. The voicemail appears. Instantly, the clicking starts somewhere in my place. Sometimes the hallway, sometimes the closet, sometimes behind the bathroom wall, always stopping when I hold my breath, starting when I breathe, like it is teaching me that my body is a switch, and the texts come, "You are late. Turn around. Go to the vest. Read it." And sometimes I don't go. Sometimes I stay inside with all the lights on and the TV blaring, and the clicking still comes, softer, patient, like it's waiting. And if I don't obey for a few nights, something else happens. My boots are not where I left them. My keys show up in my fridge. My spare battery pack is plugged into the wall, already charging even though I didn't plug it. My truck door is unlocked in the morning, and the worst is the missing time. Because it started as little gaps, a blink and it's later. A moment where you can't remember what you just did, and then it became whole chunks. I would sit on my couch at 10:30 and look up, and it's daylight. And my clothes smell like dust and hot metal. And there are fresh gravel scuffs on my boot soles. And my phone has photos of markers I never visited. And my call log shows 8-minute calls at 11:58 to that same unknown number. And my voicemail inbox has recordings that aren't just clicking anymore. They're my voice talking calm, saying, "I'm at the marker," saying, "I'm reading it," saying, "I won't be late." And underneath my voice, that tired voice humming like it's satisfied. And I tried to fight it by changing my routine. I stayed at a friend's place in town, and at 11:58 his TV froze for 1 second, like the picture held. And then my phone buzzed, and the text came anyway, and the clicking started inside his pantry, and I watched my friend's face shift from confusion to fear, and I felt sick because it was spreading, so I left. I slept in my truck by a lit gas station lot, and at 11:58 the lot lights dimmed for 1 beat, and my dashboard clock flipped to 11:58 and stuck, and I heard clicking from under my hood like a loose wire, and I turned the key, and the engine wouldn't start until 12 o'clock. Like it was holding me in that minute again. And I started realizing it wasn't about the corridor only. It was about that minute, about that marker moment, like it lives in 11:58 and uses me as a vehicle to reach whatever it needs at 12 o'clock. And I know how that sounds. I know. But tell me why it always wants markers. Tell me why it always wants numbers read. Tell me why it keeps showing me blank plates like it wants my name to be the number. And I tried to get rid of it by reporting it. I went to a supervisor in person and I said the markers have been altered. Someone's messing with right-of-way plates. And my supervisor looked at me like I was sleep-deprived, which I was. And he said, "You've been working too much night." And I said, "I'm serious." And he said, "Take a couple days." And I said, "You don't get it." And he said, "We all got ghosts out here." And he smiled like it was a joke. And I wanted to grab him and shake him because it wasn't a joke. And I left. And that night at 11:58 my phone buzzed and the text said, "You told." And my blood ran cold. And the clicking started in my closet louder than ever. And the closet door shifted slightly like something leaned against it from inside. And I stood there staring. And I held my breath. And the clicking stopped. And I let my breath out. And it started again. And I realized, it can feel me through air. It can measure me. It can punish me by turning my own body into a metronome, and I did not open the closet. I didn't. I backed away and sat on my bed with my hands over my face, and my phone played a voicemail on speaker by itself. And this voicemail had something new. It had the sound of boots on gravel, and then the sound of a marker plate being unscrewed, that little metal squeal, and then my own voice, calm, saying, "Blank." And then the tired voice saying, "Write it." And then the sound of something scratching, like a nail on metal. And I flinched because it sounded close. And I looked up, and my bedroom wall by the closet had a faint scraping sound on it, like something on the other side dragging along. And I sat frozen. And the scratching stopped at exactly 12 o'clock, and the pressure in my ears popped again. And my phone went dark, and the closet clicking stopped. And I sat there shaking. And in the morning I checked my closet door, and there were fresh scratch marks on the inside edge of the frame, like something had been trying to write along the seam. And I don't keep anything sharp in there, just clothes. And I tried to tell myself it was swelling wood. It was dryness. It was nothing. But the scratch marks were too straight, too deliberate. like letters without curves. And I started seeing those straight letter scratches in other places too. On my truck's interior plastic, on the edge of my clipboard, on the metal of my flashlight, like it was practicing writing my name onto everything I touched. And I tried to stop saying my name out loud. I stopped wearing shirts with any kind of label. I stopped filling reports with my signature. I tried to become blank, but it didn't matter because it had my voice. It had my call logs. It had those 8 minutes at 11:58 every night. And then the night that broke me for good. The night where it stopped being only messages and became something I could not pretend was tech or stress. I was driving home early, before 11:58, because I thought if I'm home and asleep it can't do it. And I hit the highway, and my phone showed 10:12, normal, and I felt a small relief. And then I passed a mile marker and something in me snapped, because the mile marker number was the number from my wrong report, the one I never should have written. And I slammed the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder, and I got out, and the night air was still. And I walked up to the marker post and shined my flashlight, and the number plate looked fresh. New bolts, like someone had installed it just for me. And beneath the number, scratched into the metal in straight block lines, was my last name, Kincaid. And my stomach flipped. And I stepped back like it burned. And right then, behind me, I heard a boot step on gravel. One step. And it sounded like it was on hollow floor again. And I froze, and I held my breath, and the world went silent. And then the boot stepped again when I breathed, matching me. And I did not turn around, because I was terrified of seeing that vest again, terrified of my eyes sliding off that face, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. And I didn't look. And the boot stepped closer, and the air at the back of my neck went cold like something leaned near. And the tired voice spoke right beside my ear. Not from the phone, in the air. And it said, "Read it." And my throat tightened so hard I thought I was going to gag, and I whispered, "No." And the voice said, "Late." And I felt my own mouth move without deciding. And I read it. I read my own name off the metal. And the moment I did, the sky seemed to dip, like the stars blinked, and my ears popped. And I felt that pressure release. And I realized I was standing alone. No footsteps, no cold at my neck, nothing. And I stumbled back to my truck, shaking, and I drove home, and when I got home, it was daylight, full daylight, and my phone showed it had been 2 days gone, and I had no memory, none, and my work log showed 2 reports filed, perfect numbers, perfect photos, and one photo was of me standing at that mile marker with my flashlight, shot from behind. And in the photo you could see the reflective strips of my shirt. And next to me, in the dark, you could see the reflective vest. Not a person fully, just the strips, like it was standing close, like it was supervising. And I sat on my trailer steps in daylight, with my head in my hands, and I started shaking so hard my whole body hurt. And I thought, it is using me to correct the road, to relabel the world, to put numbers where it wants them, to make my name part of the markers, and I don't know why. I don't know what happens when it finishes. I don't know what 12 o'clock is for it, but I know this. The corridor I used to know, the highway I used to trust, the mile markers I used as anchors. They are not anchors anymore. They are instructions. And now every night I live inside the approach to 11:58 like it's a cliff edge. I cover my phone. I turn it off. I throw it in a drawer. It still turns on. It still lights. It still shows 11:58, and the clicking starts somewhere in my place, always. And when I hold my breath, the clicking stops, and the silence feels like something leaning close, waiting. And when I breathe, the clicking resumes like it's pleased I'm still alive, and I can't stop breathing. Man, I can't stop, and that's the whole trap. It uses the only thing you can't quit to keep time with you. And I don't go near that corridor anymore. I don't take night calls. I quit the job. I told them I'm done, and my supervisor shrugged like fine, and I thought maybe quitting breaks it, but it didn't, because the messages still come, and the markers still appear on roads I've never driven, and sometimes I'm driving in town and I see a fresh reflective plate on a post that wasn't there yesterday, and my last name is scratched into it in those straight lines, like it's spreading its label through my life. And I started flinching at any tapping sound, any loose wire, any tree branch hitting a window, because my body thinks it's the clicking. And the worst part is I don't know if I'm still missing time and just not noticing. I don't know if I'm out there at 11:58 reading plates while my conscious self sits here thinking I'm safe, because I found dust on my boots one morning and my boots were by the bed, and my truck had fresh gravel stuck in the tire treads, and my phone had a new photo of a marker plate blank and shiny like a mirror, and in the reflection you could see my face turned away like I was listening, and my eyes looked empty, like I wasn't there, and I deleted it, and it came back. And tonight, it is 3 a.m, and I'm behind my trailer with my phone in my hand, and the screen keeps flickering and showing 11:58 even though it should not, and I can hear the clicking inside my trailer from the hallway, soft and patient, stopping when I hold my breath, starting when I breathe. And I'm telling you, if you ever get a call from no caller ID that leaves a voicemail instantly, and the voicemail isn't words, it's a sound that makes your skin go cold, don't play it, don't answer, don't follow instructions that appear where they shouldn't, because once you obey once you read your own name when something tells you to, it learns the sound of you, it learns the rhythm of you, and it starts writing you into places you never meant to be. And I don't know what happens when it finishes labeling. I don't know what a world looks like when the wrong mile markers become the only mile markers. But I know the road I knew is already changing, because yesterday I drove past the turn to my trailer park and the sign was clean and new and pointed the wrong direction, and my phone buzzed and the text said, "Turn around at 11:58. And my stomach dropped because I realized it doesn't just want the pipeline corridor anymore. It wants any road I trust. It wants to make every familiar direction questionable. It wants me late forever so it can keep calling me back. And the clicking just stopped inside, and the silence is thick, and my chest hurts because I'm holding my breath. And I know the second I breathe, it's going to start again. And I don't know how long I can keep this up, man. I don't know. Because you can quit a job, you can quit a road, you can quit a phone, but you cannot quit breathing. And it knows that. And I think that's why it picked me. Because my whole life out here is measured in distances and markers and minutes. And it found a minute that belongs to it, and it's making me live inside it. And I swear to God, my phone just lit and showed a new text. And I didn't even touch it, and it says, "Go to the vest." And the hallway clicking started again. And my hands are shaking so bad I can barely keep this phone steady. And I keep seeing that blank, reflective plate in my head like a mirror waiting for my name. And I'm scared that one night I'm gonna wake up and the whole highway will be renumbered and every sign will point the wrong way. And the only thing that stays the same is 11:58 on a screen and a tired voice telling me I'm late. My name's Lyle Cardenas. I'm from the backside of Sierra Blanca where the wind hits the trailers first, and I work as a trackside maintenance hand. Listen, I know how this sounds, man. I know. But I'm standing outside right now behind my place because I can't do it inside. I swear to God I can't do it inside. The walls feel too close and the windows feel like they're watching back. And my phone screen is cracked down the middle from when I dropped it the first night I saw him. So if my words cut off or I repeat myself, it's because my hands are still not steady. And I haven't slept right since it happened. It's 3 a.m. I check the time twice because I keep thinking my clock is wrong. And the porch light on the neighbor's trailer keeps flickering like it's trying to spell something. But I'm not even looking at it. I'm looking at the dirt by my boots, and I'm telling you what happened because I keep hearing that sound again. That soft scrape like a shoe dragging on gravel. Except there isn't anybody out here, and there shouldn't be. That day started normal. Normal like boring. I had 2 eggs and a piece of toast because the store was out of the cheap sausage again. And I drank coffee out of the same chipped mug that says West Texas in faded letters. And I spilled a little on my shirt when I leaned over the sink to rinse it. And that stain is still there. It won't wash out. It's like it's set into the fabric in a way I can't explain. The shirt was a light gray work tee, the kind you buy in a pack. And I had my reflective vest rolled up in the truck. and my jeans were already dusty because there's no such thing as clean jeans out here, not if you actually work. I left the trailer a little before 6 because I was scheduled for a day run first, then a night call after. And I remember checking my keys 3 times because I kept thinking I forgot them even while they were in my hand. That's the part that bothers me, dude. That started before the tracks, before any of it. That feeling like I was slightly behind myself, like I was watching me do things a half-second late. I drove out past the old stretch of road where the pavement breaks up and turns into that patched blacktop. And the sun was already bright and harsh even early. That dry light that makes everything look flat and far away. And the air had that drought stillness to it where you don't hear birds, you don't hear anything, just your own engine and your own breath. At 6:41, I punched in on the little tablet they keep in the yard office, and I remember the exact time because the tablet lagged. And I pressed it twice, and it beeped 2 times, and I joked to the dispatcher on the radio that I was getting paid double if it logs me twice. And he said, verbatim, "No, you're not, Lyle. Don't start." And I laughed, like normal. That's how normal it was. We were doing routine inspections and some minor repairs along a section near the tracks that cut past the edge of town and run out toward open land. Not the main line, where the heavy freight runs through fast, but a side stretch where they've got older ties and some signal equipment that likes to act up when the heat hits. I'm not going to get into details that don't matter. But my job is mostly checking, tightening, replacing, making sure stuff that should stay where it is stays where it is, because if it doesn't, people get hurt, and nobody out here wants that on their conscience. I was with one guy that morning, a coworker named Mason, and he's the kind of guy who chews sunflower seeds all day and spits them into a cup because he says spitting them out the window is messy. And I remember that because later I kept thinking, why did I notice that? Why did that stick in my head like a pin? We worked through the morning, heat rising, sweat in my eyes, radio chatter, trucks passing in the distance, nothing strange. Around noon, we stopped for lunch. Ate in the shade of the truck because there isn't shade anywhere else unless you count the thin shadow under the rail cars parked way off, and you do not sit under those. You just don't. I ate a sandwich from a cooler and drank warm water because I forgot to freeze the bottles the night before. And Mason said, "Man, you ever see those videos?" And I said, "What videos?" And he said, "The ones from the tracks. People keep putting them up." That's what he said. The ones from the tracks. Like the tracks are a thing that makes videos the way a tree makes leaves. I laughed because out here people record anything. A dust devil, a train horn, a coyote in the road, and he said, "No, for real. They say there's a guy out there, standing by the old stretch near where the gravel gets black. Just stands there at night." I said, "Dude, there's always a guy out there at night. You got kids sneaking out, you got folks drinking, you got people doing things they do not want seen." Mason shook his head and said, "Not like this. They say he doesn't move." I said, "Then it's a pole." Mason gave me this look like he wanted to be mad but didn't want to admit he was scared. And he said, "They shine a flashlight and he's closer." That's what they say. I remember those exact words. They shine a flashlight and he's closer. I remember the way he said closer, like he put weight on it. I said, "Yeah, okay." And I changed the subject because you do that. You don't let weird talk sit in the air too long. Later that afternoon, we finished up the work order and headed back. It should have ended there, man. It should have been a boring day, a hot day, a normal day, and then maybe I would have slept like a person sleeps. But at 7:30 that night, the dispatcher called me again because one of the signal boxes was throwing a fault, and they wanted eyes on it before the next scheduled run. It was supposed to be quick, in and out. Mason wasn't on call anymore, so it was me alone. I drove back out as the sun went down. That orange West Texas sunset that makes the tracks look like 2 thin lines of fire. And I remember thinking, I should have brought another water. And I remember the smell in the truck, that mix of dust and old coffee, and the faint, sharp scent of the cleaner my neighbor sells door to door. I pulled up near the service road, parked, and stepped out. The air was cooler, but not cool, just less brutal. The sky was clear, no clouds, and there was this quiet that felt like it had pressure behind it. I walked along the ballast with my flashlight and my tool bag, radio on my shoulder, and the only sound was my boots crunching on gravel and the faint hum from the box I was headed to. I did what I always do. I opened it, checked the connections, looked for heat damage, checked the readout. Everything looked fine. That happens. The system throws a fault, you show up, it behaves. It's like a kid acting up until the parent walks into the room. I was closing the panel when I heard something that made me pause. Not a voice, not a scream, nothing like that. It was a soft click, like a rock tapped against another rock. I froze because the desert teaches you that sound means something alive is nearby. I lifted my light and scanned. At first I saw nothing, just the rails stretching into dark, the low shape of scrub, the faint outline of the old storage building farther down that's been empty for years. Then I saw him. I need you to understand, I didn't see him like a jump, like something popped out. It was more like my brain finally accepted what my eyes had been picking up in the background. A shape, upright, near the far side of the tracks, where the gravel turns darker from old oil stains. He was tall, too tall to be a kid. Not tall like a basketball player in town, but tall like he didn't match the proportions your mind expects. He was standing still, not shifting weight, not turning his head, not doing that thing people do when they're trying to act like they're not watching you. Just still. And the thing that hit me first was not fear. I hate saying that, because it makes me sound brave. I wasn't brave. The first thing was irritation, because I was thinking, great, some guy out here messing around, and I'm going to have to tell him to move on, and if he doesn't, I'm going to have to call it in, and I don't want paperwork. So I shouted, "Hey man, you all right out there? This is a work zone." And my voice sounded weird in the open air, like it didn't travel right. No response. I took a few steps closer, staying on my side of the rail, and I lifted my flashlight to get a better look. The beam hit him, and I swear to God, dude, I swear to God, he was closer. Not walking closer, not moving closer, just closer, like the distance collapsed, like my light did something to the space between us. My stomach went cold. I lowered the light and blinked and raised it again because that's what you do. You think your eyes are playing. You think you misjudged. You think maybe he was always there. But when I raised it again, he was closer again, still not moving, still like a cutout, still like he was waiting to be acknowledged. I stepped back because my body did it before my mind caught up, and I said, "Listen, buddy, you need to move along. You can't be on the tracks." And I tried to sound firm like you're supposed to. No response. The beam was on him, and I could make out a little more. He looked like he had on dark clothes, no reflective gear, no hat. His arms were down at his sides. His head was angled slightly, like he was looking at the ground in front of him, not at me. And then something happened that made my throat tighten so hard I had to swallow to breathe. I saw the gravel near his feet. There were no footprints. That might sound stupid, like why would there be? But out here, the ballast shifts. The dust shows everything. If somebody stands in one place even for a minute, you see scuffs. You see marks. There was nothing. It was like he didn't press into the ground. I turned my radio on and said, "Dispatch, this is Lyle. I've got someone on the right-of-way near the signal box. Can you advise?" And all I got was static. Not normal static, not the quick hiss. It was a thicker sound, like wind in a tube. I tapped it and tried again. Static. I started walking back toward my truck, but I kept my flashlight in his direction because my brain was screaming at me not to lose sight of him. The second I moved the light off him, the world felt lighter, like pressure lifted. The second I put the beam back, he was closer again. I backed up faster. I told myself he was walking when the light was off and freezing when it was on, like some kind of game, like he was messing with me. That's the only normal explanation, right? But here's the problem. I never once saw him move, not even a sway. And there's another problem. When I got to my truck, I fumbled my keys, dropped them in the dirt, and when I bent to grab them, I heard that soft click again. Closer now, like a rock tapped. I stood up and the beam was still out there. and he was at the edge of the ballast on my side. Across that distance in seconds with no movement. I got in the truck so fast, I hit my knee on the door frame. I locked the doors. I started the engine and it coughed like it didn't want to, and I looked in the mirror and I saw him, not in the headlight beam, but in that dim wash behind it, standing in the road dust like he belonged there. I threw the truck into reverse and backed up hard, tires spitting gravel. When I looked again, he was still there. Same posture, same stillness. I drove away without finishing the paperwork, without calling it in properly, just drove until the tracks were behind me and the lights of town were in front of me. I kept telling myself, it was a guy. It was a prank. It was someone high. It was someone trying to scare people. That's what I told myself, man. I pulled into the yard, tried the radio again, and it worked fine. Dispatch asked why I hadn't signed off. I said the box looked fine and I'd write it up in the morning. He said, "You sure?" And I said, "Yes." And I didn't mention the figure because I didn't want to be that guy on the channel. You know, the guy everyone laughs at. I went home, ate leftover beans, sat on the edge of my bed, and listened to the trailer creak in the wind. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that posture, that still shape. Around midnight, I grabbed my phone and I searched for the videos Mason mentioned. I found them. Not hard. People had them clipped, reposted, labeled like it was a local joke. The footage was shaky, night footage. Phone cameras trying to do their best. You could see the tracks, the dark land. And you could see him, way off, standing there, not moving. In one video, the person filming says, "Man, he's still there." And another voice says, "Shine it." And the flashlight beam hits him and the camera adjusts. And then the filmer starts breathing fast and says, "He's closer, he's closer." And the other voice says, "No, wait, he did not move." And the camera shakes like they want to run but can't stop looking. In the comments, people laughed, people argued, people said it's edited, people said it's a prank, people said it's a signpost, but there were too many videos from too many angles. And there was a pattern. Every time the light hit him, he was closer in the next frame. Not between frames, not in motion, just closer, like the camera skipped the part where distance happens. I sat there with my phone in my hand and felt the hair on my arms lift because I knew it wasn't just me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day at work, I tried to act normal. I didn't tell Mason. I didn't tell anyone. I kept my head down, did my checks, filled out my forms. But all day I kept thinking about the footprints, or lack of them, and about the way the radio went dead only when I needed it. That evening, the dispatcher said they still needed someone to confirm the box readings because the system logged an interruption. He said they wanted a recheck. I said send someone else. He said everyone else was tied up and it would be quick. I said I already checked it. He said, "Just go verify." I stared at the tablet, at my own name next to the work order, and I felt this anger rise like, why do I have to be the one? I said fine, but I didn't go alone. I called Mason and asked if he wanted overtime. He asked why. I said just because. He laughed and said, "You scared of the dark now, man?" And I said, "No, I just want it done right." He met me at the yard at 8:10. He saw my face and he didn't joke as much after that. We drove out together. The sun went down again. Same flat land, same long horizon, same feeling like the world is too big and you're too small. On the way, Mason said, "Those videos got my cousin spooked. People are out there looking for it now." I said, "They need to stop." Mason said, "You saw it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He looked at me and said, "Dude." I said, "Just drive." We parked near the service road. We stepped out. The air had that metallic taste it gets sometimes when the heat breaks and the dust holds the scent of old iron. We walked along the ballast. Mason had his own flashlight, one of those bright ones that can throw a beam far. I told him, "Do not shine it down the tracks unless you have to." He laughed once, a short laugh, and said, "What? You think it's going to get mad?" I said, "Just don't." We got to the box. We opened it. Everything looked normal again. Mason said, "See? Told you." Then he stopped talking because he heard it too, that soft click. He turned his head. I saw his face go blank, like his mind was trying to process something it didn't have a folder for. I didn't even need to look where he was looking because I already knew. The figure was there, farther than last time, near the dark gravel. Same posture, same stillness. Mason whispered, "That is not a pole." I said, "Keep your light down." He said, "I can't see his face." I said, "Keep your light down." Mason lifted his flashlight anyway. The beam hit the figure, and Mason sucked in air like he burned his tongue. The figure was closer. Mason said, "No, no, no, I didn't. I did not see him move." I said, "Turn it off." Mason turned it off, then on again, like he was testing a switch. And when the beam hit again, the figure was closer again. Mason's voice started doing that high-edge thing where a grown man is trying not to sound scared and failing. He said, "Lyle, I swear to God, he's, and he couldn't finish." I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. He resisted like he wanted to stand his ground. I said, "We're leaving." Mason said, "We can call it in." I said, "Radio." He tried his radio and got the same thick static. He slapped it. Static. He looked at me and I saw the moment he realized this wasn't a joke. The figure didn't move, but it felt like it was waiting for us to decide. Mason said, "Shine it again, just one more time, I want to see." I said, "No." He said, "Dude, I need to know." I said, "I know." He raised the light anyway. The figure was so much closer that I could see the line of his shoulders. I could see the outline of his hands. Still no movement. Still no footprints. And then, the worst part happened. The part that makes me feel sick because it wasn't even dramatic. It was small. Mason's flashlight flickered, just a normal flicker like batteries do. And in that brief, dim moment, the figure was gone. Not farther away. Not blended into dark. Gone. Mason swung the beam around fast, scanning, breathing hard. I did the same. We saw nothing. For 1 second, I felt relief so sharp it hurt. Then I felt it shift behind us, that feeling like when you step into a room and realize someone else is already there. Mason turned first. He shined his light toward the service road, and there he was, standing beside our truck, close enough that the beam lit the dust on his clothes. Mason yelled, "Hey!" and his voice cracked. The figure did not respond. Mason took 1 step forward without thinking, and I grabbed him by the vest and yanked him back. I said, "Do not go near him." Mason said, "He's right there." I said, "Get in the truck." We ran, man. We ran like kids, like we were late for something and scared to be caught, and gravel slid under our boots. We got to the truck and the doors were unlocked. Even though I locked them when we left it, I always lock them. I'm obsessive about it. And I remember seeing the lock button down when I left. The doors were unlocked. Mason saw that too because he said, "Why is it open?" And his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. We got in and slammed the doors, and I hit the lock button and it clicked, and I started the engine and it turned over immediately like it had been waiting. I looked out the windshield and the figure was still there, off to the side, not in front of us, not blocking us, just present. Mason rolled the window down a crack because he said we needed to hear if he spoke. I shouted, "Who are you?" And I felt stupid and desperate as soon as the words left. The figure did something then. Not a big movement. His head lifted, just a little. Enough that I could see a suggestion of where his face should be. There was no detail. It wasn't darkness. It wasn't a hood. It was like my eyes refused to form it, like my brain kept sliding off it. Mason whispered, "I can't see him right." I said, "Don't look at his face." Mason said, "I already did." And then the radio, my truck radio, not the shoulder radio, the dashboard one, crackled to life. And I heard a voice that sounded like dispatch but stretched, like it was coming through a long pipe. It said, "Lyle, confirm location." Mason looked at me and I looked at the radio. I said, "Dispatch, we're at the signal box near the service road. We've got..." and my voice stopped because I didn't know what to say without sounding insane. The radio hissed. The voice said, "Confirm location." I said it again. The voice said, "Confirm location." Mason said, "It's looping." The figure stood there, and the air in the cab started to feel thick, like when a storm is coming, even if you can't see clouds. I turned the headlights on. The beams hit the figure full, and he was closer to the hood than he should have been, like the light pulled him. Mason grabbed my arm and said, "Drive, drive!" And I threw it into gear and rolled forward. The figure did not step out of the way. He was not in the way. He was just closer, like the front of the truck had moved under him. I hit the brakes hard and the truck jerked, and the figure was still not in front, still beside, but closer again. And Mason started making this sound in his throat like he was trying not to cry. I said, "We're leaving," and I hit the gas and drove down the service road as fast as I dared. In the rearview mirror I saw him, still standing by where the truck had been. But then the mirror shook and he was closer in the mirror, like he was behind us, then closer again. And I realized I was doing the same thing as the flashlight. My headlights were the flashlight. My reverse lights, my brake lights, the light from the cab. Any light that touched him made the distance collapse. I turned the interior light off immediately. Mason slapped my hand away like he thought I was turning something else off. I said, "Light." He said, "What?" I said, "No light." We drove with the dashboard dimmed low, with our own faces in shadow, and I kept my eyes on the road and not on the mirror. Mason kept looking back anyway because you can't not. He kept whispering, "He's not there, he's not there," and then, "He's there, he's there," and his voice would go quiet again. We got back to town. We pulled into the yard and slammed the gate behind us. The yard lights were bright, harsh, safe-looking. I got out, and my legs felt weak like I'd run miles. Mason got out and immediately threw up in the gravel. Not a lot, just bile and water. I asked if he was okay, and he waved me off, wiping his mouth with his sleeve like a kid. The dispatcher came out of the office because he saw us on the cameras. He asked what happened. I said we saw someone on the tracks. He said, "Again." I said, "Yes." He said, "You call the sheriff." I said, "We tried." Radios went static. He frowned and said, "Radios don't just go static." Mason said, "They did." The dispatcher looked at Mason like he was judging whether Mason was the type to lie. "Mason has this honest face, man. He really does." The dispatcher told us to write it up and go home. Mason and I stood by my truck after, under the yard light, and neither of us wanted to be the first to say what we were thinking. Finally, Mason said, "Lyle, that thing, I don't know what that was." I said, "Don't call it a thing." Mason said, "Dude, what else do you call it?" I said, "I don't know." Mason said, "Did you see his face?" I said, "No." Mason said, "I tried. It's like looking at, and he couldn't finish. He rubbed his eyes like he could rub the memory out. He said, "I'm not going back out there." I said, "Me neither." We agreed. We went home. Here's where it gets worse, because you'd think it would end with us avoiding the tracks, right? You'd think the horror part would be the figure, the flashlight, the chase feeling. But the figure was just the start. The next morning I woke up on my couch, not in my bed. My boots were still on. My tool bag was open on the floor and the tools were laid out in a neat line like someone had organized them. I don't do that. I'm messy. I toss my bag in the corner and forget it. The tools were lined up like a display. I sat up too fast and got dizzy. My mouth tasted like pennies. I checked my phone. The screen was cracked more than before, like spiderweb cracks spreading from the center. The time said 6:12. The date was wrong. It said it was 3 days later. I blinked and refreshed it. Same date. I opened messages. I had a string of texts from Mason. First one said, "You awake?" Second one said, "Dude, answer." Third one said, "Where are you?" Then nothing. I called him. It rang and went to voicemail. I called again. No answer. I drove to his place because I didn't know what else to do. On the way, I kept trying to piece together the missing time. I remembered the yard light. I remembered Mason throwing up. I remembered driving home. After that, blank. Not sleep blank, like a tape cutout. I got to Mason's trailer. His truck was there. The door was open. I walked in and called his name. No answer. The place smelled like stale coffee and sweat. The blinds were drawn. On his kitchen table was his flashlight, the bright one, and beside it was a little pile of gravel. Ballast gravel, the kind from the tracks. I stared at it and felt my stomach twist. Mason is not the kind of guy to bring gravel home. I called his name again. No answer. I walked back out and I noticed his tires. There was gravel stuck in the treads. Dark gravel, like the stretch near the oil stains. I stood there in the heat, sweating, and I realized I was shaking again. I drove back to the yard and asked dispatch if Mason had been in. Dispatch said, Mason called out sick yesterday. Yesterday. That means there was a yesterday I don't remember. I asked if Mason had been seen. Dispatch said no. I asked if my truck had been in the yard. Dispatch said, your truck's been here since last night. I said, no, I drove it home. Dispatch looked at me and said, Lyle, your truck is right there. And it was, parked in the exact spot I left it. Gate logs showed it never left. Cameras showed it never left. I stared at my truck and my brain started sliding sideways, like I was going to pass out. I asked dispatch if I had gone home. He said, you clocked out at 9:17 and you left on foot. On foot. I don't walk home. It's not close. It's too dark. I don't do that. I asked if there was footage. He hesitated, then pulled it up on the office monitor. The footage was grainy night vision, but you could see me. Walking out of the yard gate at 9:19, tool bag over my shoulder, head down, moving stiff. Behind me, at the far edge of the yard light, there was a tall shape standing by the fence. The camera didn't pick up details, but it picked up the outline. Still, waiting. I watched myself walk toward it. I watched myself stop near it. I watched the yard light flicker once. When it came back steady, the tall shape was closer to the camera, and I was gone. Just gone. Like the frame forgot me. Dispatch turned the monitor off like he didn't want to see anymore. He said, That's a camera glitch. I said, no. He said, Lyle, you need to go home. I said, I already did, but I didn't, and I could hear my own voice starting to ramble, and I hated it. Dispatch said, go home, get sleep. We'll deal with Mason. I drove home in a fog because my truck was in the yard, but I had keys, I had memory, and none of it matched. When I got to my trailer, my front door was unlocked. That's not normal. Inside, my tools were lined up like I said. On the counter was my cracked phone, but I was holding it. I was holding it in my hand. I looked down. The phone in my hand was my phone. The phone on the counter was also my phone. Same case, same cracks, same stickers. 2 phones. I stared at them until my eyes watered. I picked up the one on the counter, and it was warm. Not hot. Warm like it had been in a pocket. I checked it. The lock screen showed a video paused. The thumbnail was dark, but I could make out rails. Tracks. My thumb hovered. I didn't want to press play. I pressed play anyway because I'm stupid. Because curiosity is a trap. Because I needed to know. The video started shaky, my breathing loud. The sound of gravel under boots. My own voice whispered, dude, keep it down. Like I was talking to someone. Then another voice, not Mason's, said, confirm location. The same stretched dispatch voice. The camera swung, and there he was, the figure farther down, still, upright. My light beam hit him. Closer. My breath hitched, closer again. In the video, I started laughing. Not normal laugh. A thin laugh, like someone trying to mimic a laugh. I heard myself say, there you are. Like I knew him. Like I was relieved to see him. Then the camera tilted down to the gravel at my feet, and I saw something that made my skin crawl, because it was undeniable. Boot prints. My boot prints. Leading away from where I stood, across the tracks, toward the figure. But I wasn't walking. In the video, I wasn't moving. The prints appeared anyway, one by one, like they were being pressed into the gravel by an invisible step. Left, right, left, right. Perfect spacing. Impossible precision. The camera lifted again, and the figure was closer, and then closer, and then so close that the frame couldn't hold him, just dark cloth and the suggestion of a shoulder. The audio changed. It got muffled, like the microphone was covered. I heard my own voice whisper, "I don't remember, I don't remember, I don't remember," over and over. Then the video ended abruptly. I stood there in my kitchen, holding two identical phones, and I started crying. Not loud, just tears running because my body didn't know what else to do with that. I called Mason again. No answer. I called the sheriff. The line rang and rang. Then a recorded message told me to leave a message. I left one. I tried to keep it calm. I said my coworker was missing and there had been an incident near the tracks. I did not mention the figure. I did not mention two phones. I said missing. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It hit the counter and the crack spread. I picked it up and my thumb went to messages without me thinking. There was a new message thread on the second phone from a number I didn't recognize. No contact name, just numbers. The message said, "Confirm location." I stared at it. Another message came in immediately, like it had been waiting. It said, "Sierra." Then another, "Blanca." Then another, "Tracks." No punctuation, just words. I threw the phone into the sink like it was a bug. It clattered, and the screen lit up anyway. I didn't sleep that day. I sat with the curtains drawn, and every time a car passed on the road outside my trailer, I flinched like it was coming for me. At dusk, I got a call from Mason. I answered so fast my finger hurt. I said, "Mason, where are you?" He didn't answer right away. I heard breathing. Then he said, "Lyle." His voice sounded wrong, not like a bad connection, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "I'm at the tracks." I said, "Do not go there." He said, "I didn't go. I woke up here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I woke up by the gravel. My boots were off. My socks were wet." I said, "Wet from what?" He didn't answer. I heard wind on his microphone. I heard a faint clicking. I said, "Mason, listen to me. Get in your truck and leave." He said, "My truck's not here." I said, "How did you get there?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "Dude, there's a light out here." I said, "Turn around and walk toward the highway." He said, "I can't find the road." I said, "It's straight. You follow the tracks until you see the service cut. You know this." He said, "Lyle, the tracks keep changing." That's what he said. "The tracks keep changing." I said, "Stop talking like that." He said, "I'm not trying to." He sounded like he was about to cry. He said, "There's someone standing out here." I said, "Do not shine your light." He said, "I already did." I heard him swallow. He said, "He's closer." I said, "Mason, run." Mason said, "It's weird, Lyle. It's like the closer he gets, the quieter everything is, like sound goes away." I said, "Mason, run." I heard the clicking again, closer to his phone, and then the line went dead. I called back. No answer. I called again. No answer. I got in my truck and drove out there because I don't know what else you do when someone you know is in danger and you're the only one who believes it's real. The sun was setting as I drove, the sky bleeding color, and the land looked empty in that way it does where you can see miles and still feel trapped. I took the service road, dust rising behind me, and my headlights cut through the dim. I kept the interior lights off. I kept the radio off. I kept my phone on the seat face down because I couldn't stand to see that message again. When I pulled up near the box, I saw nothing at first. No Mason, no figure, just tracks and gravel in the old storage building. I got out and called Mason's name. My voice felt small. No answer. I walked along the ballast with my flashlight pointed at the ground because I didn't want to do the thing that collapses distance. I found Mason's boots first, sitting neatly side by side on a rail tie like someone placed them. His socks were on the ground next to them, wet like he said, but not from mud, from something clear that had dried stiff. I looked around and saw footprints, bare footprints, human footprints, toes and heel, pressed into the dust beside the ballast, leading along the tracks away from where I stood. But here's what made my breath stop. There were two sets. One set was Mason's, based on size, and the other set was larger, longer, like someone with a bigger foot was walking beside him. The larger set was too long to be a normal shoe print, and it was bare too, and they were perfectly aligned, like they were marching. I followed them with my light low. I told myself I would just go far enough to see Mason and then I'd get him. I'd drag him if I had to. I'd get him out. The footprints led toward the old storage building. That building has been locked for years. Everyone knows it. It's one of those abandoned structures people talk about but nobody uses. The fence around it is bent and the padlock is rusted. The door is metal. I approached and the air changed. It got colder right near the building. Not like night cold, like you stepped into shade cold even though there was no shade. The footprints stopped at the door. I shined my light on the lock. The lock was gone. The hasp was open. The door was slightly ajar. I stood there and I could hear my own breathing loud, and I could hear something else inside, a soft scrape, like fabric against metal. I said, "Mason," and my voice came out a whisper. No answer. I pushed the door with my hand and it swung open with a slow groan. Inside it smelled like old oil and dust and something else, something like wet pennies. My light beam swept across the floor and I saw more footprints, but they were wrong. They repeated in a pattern, 4 steps, stop, 4 steps, stop. Always the same spacing, always the same angle, like someone practiced it. I stepped inside and felt the hair lift on my neck because it felt like crossing a line. The building was mostly empty except for old pallets and some broken equipment. My light hit the far wall and I saw writing. Not spray paint, not marker. It looked like someone dragged something across the dusty wall to make lines. The lines formed words, crooked but readable. Confirm location. My stomach dropped. I backed toward the door because my body knew before my mind did. The door behind me clicked shut, not slammed. Clicked, like it latched. My hands flew to the handle and it didn't move. I yanked. Nothing. I shouted Mason's name again, louder, and my voice bounced off metal and came back to me. I hit the door with my shoulder. It didn't budge. The air felt thick again, like pressure. I forced myself to breathe slow. I told myself it was a faulty latch, that the building shifted, that something jammed. I turned around because I didn't want my back to whatever was inside. My flashlight beam shook. It landed on the floor. The footprints were changing. I watched it happen, man. I watched dust compress as if an invisible foot pressed into it. A print formed, then another, coming toward me from the darkness between pallets. I took a step back and hit a stack of wood. It clattered. The print stopped for a second, then continued. I raised the light toward where the prints were coming from without thinking because you always want to see the source. The beam hit a shape, the figure, inside the building, standing between 2 pallets like he had always been there. Still, upright. And the second the light hit him, he was closer. Not moving. Closer. I felt my throat tighten so hard I gagged. I lowered the light, trying to stop it, but the beam had already done its work. The figure was now close enough that I could see the texture of his clothes, like old fabric that doesn't catch light right. I could see his hands hanging at his sides. Long fingers. Too long. I said, "Listen, I'm telling you, I don't want trouble, I just want my friend," and I hated myself for talking like it was a person I could negotiate with. The figure's head tilted, just a fraction, and I felt something in my skull shift, like pressure behind my eyes. The air around him seemed to bend. I couldn't see his face. My brain kept sliding off it. I took a step sideways, looking for another exit, a window, anything. There was a small service door on the side wall. I ran toward it. The moment my light moved away from him, I felt that pressure ease, like a hand releasing my throat. I slammed into the service door and yanked. It opened, and I stumbled out into the dusk. I fell into gravel and scraped my palms. I rolled over and looked back into the building. The figure stood in the doorway I'd just come through, not moving, still. And then, dude, I saw something behind him in the darkness. Not another figure, not a face, just movement like a curtain shifting even though there was no curtain. Then I heard a sound that was not from nowhere, but felt like it was coming from inside my own head. A train horn. Except there was no train. I know what trains sound like out here. They echo, they roll. This horn was flat, like someone playing it through a speaker in a closed room. It blew once, then twice. Then it kept blowing with no breath behind it. My ears started ringing. I clapped my hands over them and it didn't help. I scrambled to my feet and ran to my truck. I got in and slammed the door and locked it and turned the engine on. The horn sound stopped instantly. Silence. I sat there panting, sweat cold on my skin, hands shaking on the wheel. I looked at my phone on the seat. The screen lit up by itself. A message appeared. Confirm location. I threw the phone into the passenger footwell. I drove back to town so fast I didn't look at the mirror. I went straight to the sheriff's office and told them Mason was missing and I'd found his boots near the tracks and the building door was open. I told them the building had writing on the wall. I did not tell them about the figure because I needed them to go out there. I needed them to take it seriously, and I knew if I mentioned a tall, unmoving presence that reacts to light, they'd smile and nod and file me under crazy. The deputy at the desk took notes, asked for Mason's full name, asked for his truck make, asked what time he was last seen. I kept stumbling over time because I didn't know what day it was anymore. The deputy said they'd send someone to check the area. I sat in a plastic chair and stared at the floor and tried not to cry because grown men don't cry in sheriff's offices, not in front of people who judge. Around 10, a deputy came back and said they checked the building and it was locked. Locked. The padlock was on. Rusted. The door was not ajar. There was no writing on the wall. They said it was empty except dust. I said, no, I was in there. I said, there was a message. Confirm location. The deputy looked at me like I was wasting his time. He said, sir, are you on something? I said, no. I said, I don't do that. He said, then you need sleep. He said maybe Mason went off on his own. Maybe he got drunk. Maybe he wandered. I said, Mason doesn't drink much. He said everyone drinks. I wanted to hit him. I didn't. I left. I went back to the yard. Dispatch said there were rumors going around town about people going out to the tracks at night, about kids filming again, about someone daring someone else. He said the company might put up more fencing. I asked if anyone had found Mason. No. I asked if anyone had seen my truck leaving on foot on the cameras again. Dispatch looked uncomfortable and said, Lyle, you should not ask me that. I said, show me. He said, go home. I said, show me. He pulled up the footage from the previous night. It showed me again, leaving the yard on foot. Same stiff walk, same tool bag. The timestamp said 9:19 again, the exact same time. I watched myself stop at the edge of the yard light. I watched the tall shape at the fence. I watched the light flicker. I watched myself disappear. And then, the footage jumped. It cut to 9:19 again. Same frames, same movement. It looped. Dispatch whispered, it keeps doing that. He said they thought it was the system glitching, but it wasn't random. It was exact. Impossible precision. The same walk, the same flicker, the same disappearance, over and over. Dispatch said they tried to scrub it and it reappeared. I stared at the loop until my eyes hurt. I said, that's me. He said, I know. I said, that shape by the fence. He said, don't say it. I said, it's real. He said, Lyle, go home. He sounded like he was scared the words themselves would bring it closer. I left. I drove home and I passed the stretch where the tracks run near the road, and I kept my eyes forward. But I saw it anyway. In the corner of my vision, far off, a tall shape by the rails, not moving. And I felt that cold drop in my stomach like an elevator cable snapped. I got home and I sat on my couch and I stared at my wall until dark. When it got dark, I heard the clicking outside again, soft, like a rock tapped. I told myself it was an animal. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself anything. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. Confirm location. I turned the phone off. I pulled the battery pack from the wall. I turned off the lights in my trailer and sat in dark like a kid hiding. I hate that I did that. I hate that this thing reduced me to that. Around midnight, my neighbor knocked on my door. I didn't answer. He knocked again and called my name. I didn't answer. Finally, I answered because I thought maybe he'd call someone. I opened the door a crack. He stood there in the porch light, squinting. He said, "Lyle, you okay, man? You've been acting strange." I said, "I'm tired." He said, "Folks are saying weird stuff about the tracks. You been out there?" I said, "No." He said, "I saw your truck by the yard." I said, "I've been home." He said, "Dude, no you haven't." He said, "I saw you walking down by the tracks last night." He said you were carrying that bag of yours. He said you didn't answer when he yelled. I felt my mouth go dry. I said, "What time?" He said, "Around 9:20. He said, "I was driving back from the store. I took the road that runs by there." He said you were by the service cut. He said there was someone standing farther down. He said he thought it was Mason at first. He said, "I didn't stop because it gave me the creeps." I asked him, "Did you shine your headlights?" He said, "Obviously I was driving." I said, "Did you see the person by you move?" He frowned and said, "No." He said, "It's funny though." He said, "I swear he was closer when I looked in my mirror." He laughed like he wanted it to be a joke. I didn't laugh. I closed the door in his face without meaning to. I locked it. I sat on the floor with my back to the couch and I tried to breathe. That's when I realized this wasn't just a thing at the tracks. It was using the tracks like a line, like a path, like a rule. The rule was light. The rule was attention. The rule was confirmation. Confirm location. That phrase started showing up everywhere. On my phone, in my dreams, on the radio when I turned it on by accident, in the static when I tried to call Mason again. I heard it whispered in the hum of my fridge. I know that sounds insane, man. I know, but I'm telling you what my ears heard. And the missing time kept happening. I would be in my kitchen making coffee and then I'd blink and the coffee would be cold and the sun would be lower and my hands would be dirty, like I'd been outside. I'd find gravel in my shoes. I'd find dust on my pants like I'd knelt in it. Once I woke up with a smear of dark grease on my forearm like I'd brushed against the signal box, and I hadn't been at work. I started taking pictures of my hands, of my clothes, of my face, to prove to myself where I was. I started writing the date and time on paper and sticking it to the fridge, and then those papers would go missing, or they'd be moved, or they'd be flipped over. One night I put a chair against my door so if it opened, I'd hear it. I woke up with the chair in the middle of the living room and my front door wide open. The porch light was on. I never leave it on. The air outside was dead still and there were footprints in the dust on my porch. Bare footprints. 2 sets, one smaller, one longer. They led off the porch and into the dirt and then vanished, like the ground decided it had shown enough. I started avoiding light at night. I drove with my headlights dimmed as much as I could without getting pulled over. I put tape over the bright LED on my smoke detector because it felt like an eye. I stopped checking my phone because the screen lighting up felt like bait. And the more I avoided light, the more my world shrank. I was living like a person hiding from something that doesn't need to run to catch you. Mason stayed missing. The sheriff stopped calling. People in town started saying he ran off. People started saying he did something bad and couldn't face it. People started saying he got picked up by someone passing through. None of it felt right. Because I kept seeing Mason, dude. Not him in person, but him in places he shouldn't be. I'd be driving past the grocery store and I'd see a man in the parking lot wearing a reflective vest, standing still beside a cart return. I'd glance and my brain would say, Mason, and then I'd look closer, and the man's proportions would be wrong. Too tall, too still, and my stomach would drop. And when I'd look away and look back, he'd be closer, not walking, just closer, like the distance got erased. I stopped going to the store at night. I stopped going anywhere at night. Then it started happening in the day. Midday heat, sun high, shadows sharp. I was at the yard filling out a form, and I felt that observed feeling, the certainty of being watched by nothing visible, like a weight on the back of my neck. I looked up and saw, across the yard by the fence line where the gravel meets dirt, a tall figure standing in partial shade. Still, not moving. The yard lights weren't on. It was bright day, but the sun itself is light. I stared, and my eyes started doing that sliding thing where they couldn't form his face. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the clipboard, to pretend I didn't see it, because I'd learned attention is an invitation. When I looked back, he was closer, not by steps, by erasure, like space folded. I dropped my pen. Dispatch saw my face and said, "Lyle, don't." Like he knew. Like he had started seeing it too. He whispered, "Don't confirm." That word, confirm. It had infected everything. Around that time, people in town stopped filming the tracks. The videos slowed. The comments got quieter. Some folks deleted their posts. You'd hear rumors in the diner that someone's cousin went out there and came back weird. That someone's kid got lost for an hour and couldn't explain where they'd been even though they were on flat land with no trees. That someone saw a flashlight beam moving by itself like a floating eye. But nobody wanted to be the one saying it out loud, because saying it made it closer. I tried leaving. I tried packing a bag and driving to a bigger place where there are streetlights and neighbors close by. I made it to the edge of town, heading out on the road, and I saw him by the tracks again, far off. And I kept driving because I told myself I'm done letting that stop me. Then my phone buzzed. I hadn't turned it on. It buzzed anyway. I glanced at it, and the screen lit up and the message was there. Confirm location. And in the moment my eyes touched that screen, I felt the space inside my truck change. It's hard to explain. It was like the cab got longer, like the distance between the steering wheel and the windshield stretched. My hands felt far away. I looked up and the road ahead looked the same, but also not. Like the lines were slightly off, like the horizon was too close. I slowed down. I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw the tracks behind me, even though I'd already turned away from them. I saw the rails running alongside my road in the mirror like I hadn't left at all. And I saw him in the mirror, standing on the gravel, and he was closer in the mirror than he should have been. I slammed the brakes and pulled over, and I turned the phone off and I closed my eyes. And I counted. 1, 2, 3, like a kid. When I opened them, the mirror showed normal road behind me. No tracks, no figure. But my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't grip the wheel. I turned around and drove back home because I understood then that it wasn't just a place. It was a rule I carried now, like a scent, like a mark. The next part is the part I keep looping on in my head because it's the closest I've come to understanding what it wanted, and it still doesn't make sense. I woke up one morning and my 2 phones were gone. Both. The one I held and the one in the sink. Gone. My trailer was quiet. No buzzing, no screens lighting up. I felt relief, real relief, like breathing after being underwater. I told myself I could reset my life. I went to work. I did my job. I avoided looking toward the fence. I kept my head down. The day passed like a normal day. Then around 4:30, a courier truck pulled into the yard and the driver handed dispatch a padded envelope. Dispatch called me into the office and held the envelope like it was something that might bite. He said, "It's for you." There was no return address. My name was written on it in block letters. Not my full name, just Lyle, like whoever wrote it knew only what mattered. Dispatch said. I didn't sign for it. It was just there. I took it with my hands shaking. I opened it on the desk. Inside was my phone. One of them. Cracked screen. Same case. Same stickers. It turned on by itself as soon as my fingers touched it. The lock screen showed a map pin. Not a normal map app. Just a gray screen with a dot and a line. It looked like a simple coordinate display. Under it, in plain text, it said, "Confirm location." Dispatch whispered, "Don't." I didn't want to. I swear I didn't want to. But my thumb moved like it wasn't mine. I tapped the screen. The phone unlocked without a code. A new screen appeared. It showed a video feed. Live. Night vision. The angle was low, like the phone was sitting on gravel. I could see the rails. I could see the dark stretch where the oil stains are. I could hear breathing through the speaker. Not mine. Not Mason's. Slow, patient. Then the camera shifted slightly, like it was nudged. And in the frame, standing near the tracks, was Mason. He was barefoot. He was wearing his work pants but no shirt. His face looked hollow, eyes wide, staring straight ahead like he wasn't seeing anything. He was standing still, and beside him, a little behind, was the tall figure, even taller next to Mason, posture identical, arms down, head angled. The feed had no timestamp, no date, just that image. My throat closed. I tried to speak and couldn't. Dispatch grabbed my shoulder and said, "Lyle, put it down." I couldn't. The speaker crackled and the stretched voice came through, the same one that sounded like dispatch, but wrong. It said, "Confirm location." Mason's mouth moved in the feed. He whispered, "Lyle." I could barely hear it. He whispered, "It's not the tracks, dude." He whispered, "It's the light." He whispered, "I can't." And then the feed glitched and Mason's face blurred like the camera couldn't hold it. I shouted, "Mason, where are you?" And my voice sounded like I was shouting into a canyon. The tall figure's head lifted slightly, and I felt that pressure behind my eyes again, like my skull wanted to split. Dispatch slapped the phone out of my hand. It hit the floor. The screen cracked more. The feed went black. Dispatch said, "You're done." He said, "Go home." He said, "Quit if you have to." He said, "Just go." I went. I drove home and I sat in my trailer and I stared at the wall and I kept hearing Mason's whisper, "It's the light." I thought about every time it got closer. Every time someone shined something. Every time a screen lit up. Every time a headlight hit. Every time a yard light flickered. It wasn't chasing like an animal. It was being pulled. Or it was pulling us. Like light was a rope and attention was a hand. That night I decided to do something stupid. I decided to go back to the tracks on purpose, but not like the others did. Not with a flashlight, not filming, not daring. I decided to go with no light at all, to see if I could break the rule. I waited until midnight. I left my phone at home. I left all screens off. I covered the small LEDs with tape. I wore dark clothes. I drove with my headlights on only until I reached the service road. Then I turned the engine off and let the truck roll slowly so the lights wouldn't flare. I parked and sat in the dark, letting my eyes adjust. The stars were bright. The land was a black bowl. The tracks were faint lines. I stepped out, and my boots crunched. Immediately I heard the soft click. I froze. It came again, closer. I kept my hands at my sides, and I did not turn on a light. I walked toward the sound, guided by starlight, by memory of where the rails run. The air felt thick, the silence felt heavy. I reached the area near the oil-stained gravel and I stopped. I listened. The clicking stopped. For a moment I thought, maybe this works. Maybe if I don't shine anything, it can't close distance. Then I realized something that made my heart race. My eyes were adjusting. That's light too, in a way. My pupils widening, my vision sharpening, my attention becoming a beam. I felt silly thinking that, but fear makes you think in weird loops. I stood still and tried to make my mind blank. I tried not to confirm anything. And then, without any flashlight, without any headlight, without any screen, I saw him. Not because he appeared, because the stars outlined him. A tall shape against the faint glow of the horizon, standing by the tracks. Still. He was far. I told myself, do not look. I looked anyway. I stared at him, and I felt that pressure behind my eyes. The distance did not collapse instantly, but something else happened. The sound changed. My own breathing sounded delayed, like I'd inhale and then a second later I'd hear it. My boots on gravel sounded like someone else's boots a beat behind mine. I turned my head and saw, to my left, another set of tracks. Not the same rails. Another pair, running parallel, but closer together, like narrower gauge. They weren't there before. I know these tracks. I have worked them. There is one line and a side spur, not two full lines. But there they were, and they looked new, clean, like they had been laid recently. I blinked hard. They were still there. I looked back at the figure and he was closer, not by light, by my looking, by my confirming he existed. I stepped back. The new tracks remained. I felt like I was standing in a place that had slid out of my world and into another one that obeyed different rules. I heard a faint sound behind me, like a train approaching, but the ground didn't vibrate. The air didn't move. It was like the idea of a train. The figure was closer. I could see his hands now, hanging, too long. I could see the edge of his sleeves. I couldn't see his face. I forced myself to look down at the gravel. In the dust, right between my boots, words were pressed as if someone wrote them with a finger. Confirm location. I backed up, heart hammering. I turned to run to my truck, and when I turned, the distance to my truck was wrong. It was farther than it should have been. The truck was there, silhouette, but it looked small, like it was at the end of a long corridor. The service road felt stretched. Time felt stretched. I ran anyway, boots sliding, breath burning. And I swear to God, the crunch of gravel under my feet sounded like two sets of footsteps, mine and something matching my pace perfectly. I didn't look back. I reached my truck and yanked the door open and got in and slammed it. The cab was dark. I fumbled for the key. My hands were numb. The engine turned over and the headlights flared on because I didn't think to keep them off. The beams lit the tracks and there he was, so close to the front of my truck that my body jolted like I'd hit something. He wasn't in front. He was beside, always beside, like he knew the rule of not being a physical obstacle, only a presence. In the split second the headlights hit him. He was closer again, so close that the beam lit the dust on his clothes. And I heard Mason's voice, not from outside, not from the radio, but from the passenger seat. Mason whispered, "Don't confirm, dude." I snapped my head to the passenger seat. Nobody was there. The seat was empty. The whisper came again, from nowhere and everywhere. "Don't confirm." I slammed the interior light switch off even though it wasn't on. I covered my eyes with one hand like a child. I hit the gas and drove, tires spitting gravel. I didn't stop until I was back in town under streetlights. I parked outside my trailer and sat there shaking. When I finally went inside, my phones were on the kitchen counter. Both of them, side by side. Warm. Screens dark. I didn't touch them. I sat on the floor like I am now, back against the wall, staring at the line where the floor meets the baseboard, listening to the house hum. That's when I realized the ending isn't a rescue or a reveal. The ending is that I'm changed. I don't go near tracks anymore. I don't drive roads that cross them. I take the long way, even if it costs gas I can't afford. I flinch when a light flickers. I can't look at my own reflection in a dark window because it feels like I'm confirming something. I can't watch videos at night because the glow of a screen makes my stomach drop. I can't stand under yard lights because I think about the flicker, the loop, the way the camera repeated 9:19 like time got stuck on a single frame. And Mason, dude, Mason is still missing. Officially. But sometimes, in the quiet right before dawn when the sky is still dark and the birds haven't started, I hear that soft click outside, like gravel tapped, and my phone, even when it's off, buzzes once like a heartbeat. And when I can't help it and I pick it up, there's a message waiting that wasn't there before. Confirm location. And I swear to God, I try not to answer. I try not to think it. I try not to look out the window because I know what happens when you look. But sometimes my eyes drift anyway. And out past the trailer park where the land opens up and the tracks run like a scar through the dark, I see a tall shape standing still by the rails. And I don't shine a light, and I don't film, and I don't say anything. But the next time I blink, the shape is closer. Not because it walked, not because it moved, but because the distance between us is no longer something I can trust. And then my clock on the microwave changes to 9:19 for no reason. And the porch light flickers once, and I feel the pressure behind my eyes like a hand trying to turn my head. And I'm telling you, listen, I'm telling you, the worst part is not the fear in the moment. The worst part is that it's teaching me a rule I never asked to learn. That attention is a doorway, that light is a rope, that confirmation is consent. And I don't know how to live in a world where simply noticing something can bring it closer without it ever taking a step.